They say blood determines a person's destiny. But what if one day it becomes their greatest curse? He was born with a bloodline that even the mightiest feared. While some dreamed of possessing such power, others were willing to destroy it at any cost. Now, every step he takes has the power to change the fate of an entire world. But can he prove that a person's true worth is not defined by their blood, but by the choices they make? A young man with blue hair froze at the edge of a rooftop next to a helipad, his gaze fixed on the people in black hooded cloaks. Watching them, he involuntarily recalled his father's words. My father once told me about... The wind tousled the young man's hair as he delved deeper into his memories. That my immortality was the result of inheriting his lineage. A loud, dull thud of a dumbbell interrupted the silence in the gym, prompting the young man to another thought. And, from my mother, a tall woman stood in the middle of an empty gymnasium, pulling on gloves and staring into space. Recalling his mother's face in that gym, the young man continued to ponder. I received the ability to transform. An entourage of soldiers headed towards Zero as a tall glass building, its upper floors shaking from explosions. The structure itself was encircled by a ring of fire. Returning to his father's words, the young man developed his thought. A world where such special people as immortals live. Before his eyes flashed a scene of battle, where one of the warriors effortlessly struck down an opponent, while his partner recoiled in horror from an enemy with a knife in hand. A young man and a girl sit on a rooftop under heavy fire, covering each other's backs in a fierce skirmish. Transformers. Two mutated fighters clashed in a furious duel, raising columns of thick smoke and ash around them. Superhumans. An unknown young man, slightly frowning and shielding his face with his hand, peered into the distance, fighting against gusts of wind and trying to discern the silhouette of a soldier. Mages. A dark-haired youth gazed in fascination at the sky, which was covered by a green, transparent grid, resembling a magical shield. Awakening from his memories, the young man forcefully kicked the wounded leg against the floor. The body of the dark-haired fighter was stained crimson, his clothes reduced to rags, and he held a defeated enemy aloft in his right hand. His eyes flared with blue light as he finished his thought while standing in the corridor of a ruined building. And within me flows the power of 2 out of 4 lineages. Breathing heavily, the young man raised his gaze, looking sternly ahead as his left eye glowed with an azure flame. Directly before him stood several soldiers who had already surrounded him, preparing for a decisive attack. Slightly furrowing his brow, the young man smirked. You know what, guys? My current rank in Special Forces is NS. 3 enemies standing before him merely retorted, What are you babbling about, psycho? A group of fighters one by one drew their weapons. Some raised automatic rifles on one side, while others brandished axes and swords on the other, preparing for battle. Clenching a soldier's body in his hands, the wounded young man stood among the rubble as opponents slowly closed the circle around him. He intently watched the enemy, and blue flame flared anew at his face, foreshadowing a crushing blow. In an instant, soldiers unleashed a hail of fire upon him. Shots rang out all around, but the young man shielded himself with the limp body of the enemy, using it as a living shield. Withstanding the barrage of bullets, he didn't budge, protecting himself with his burden and glaring at the shooters with eyes full of rage. At that moment, melee fighters rushed into attack, drawing blades and axes. In a second, the young man flung the body towards the nearest enemies, knocking them off their feet, and with one swift lunge closed the distance. With a powerful knee strike, he shattered the mask of the closest opponent, forcing him to drop his sword. Without losing a moment for thought, the young man grabbed the handle of the enemy's blade. With a wave of his hand, he crushed the soldier's helmet, completely incapacitating him and delivering heavy blows to the fighter standing nearby. With fierce determination in his eyes, the young man unleashed one strike after another upon the enemies. A swarthy youth with coral hair stared furiously ahead and shouted an order. Telekinesis! Continue firing! A crimson-stained hand slowly raised the helmet of a wounded fighter. The soldiers opened fire anew, not stopping the barrage for a second. Dodging bullets and shielding himself with one of the enemy's helmets, the young man fiercely broke through forward. With madness in his gaze, he drew his blade. Moving from one opponent to another, the young man swiftly dealt with them, suppressing any resistance. Approaching the last survivor, he gathered all his strength and delivered a final, devastating blow. Looking at him, the pink-haired youth exclaimed in horror, "Just who the hell are you?" Surrounded by defeated enemies, the young man calmly replied, "Ah, yes. I seem to have forgotten to introduce myself." A dangerous smirk played on his face, and once again enveloped in blue radiance, he concluded, "NS means that my power goes far beyond ordinary standards." Standing among a crowd of pedestrians at a traffic light, the dark-haired young man maintained an indifferent expression while a voiceover narrated, "Someone told me about what the world was like before my birth. A group of people stepped onto the pedestrian crossing together, and at that moment, mysterious black smoke began to condense beneath one of them. Noticing something amiss, the young man paused for a moment and looked away from his phone. He lowered his gaze, and in an instant, a grimace of pure horror contorted his face. Naim, an unknown black hole rapidly expanded, engulfing the young man's body. Pedestrians panicked and scattered. As the figure of the unfortunate man disappeared into the black swirl, a mysterious voice said, "The world before the appearance of the black hole." In an instant, people, seeing the abyss open beneath their feet, ran away screaming in fear and panic. As the victim finally sank into the dark depths, limbs of a monstrous creature began to emerge from the same void. A second later, hordes of creatures crawled out of the hole in the ground, roaring furiously at everyone they encountered. At that moment, the voice finished its thought. Was perfectly normal. A helicopter flies over an empty, ruined city, gradually being consumed by an expanding black hole. A report comes from the speakers. The anomaly continues to grow in size. The scale of this disaster is beyond description. A real nightmare come true. All human forces tried to fight back. As a blood-stained sneaker lies forlornly on broken pavement, the helicopter continues to broadcast. But the number of enemies only multiplied. A small boy lying on the ground with a severe head wound gasps in pain, tears welling up in his eyes. Raising his head, the child follows with his gaze an adult man walking by as the voiceover says, "This story." The young man confidently walks towards hordes of monsters along broken city streets, and the mysterious narrator continues and tells about an abnormal world. Over time, more and more black holes began to appear all over the planet. They emerged in the most unexpected places, high in the sky, on the surface of the ocean, and right in the middle of ordinary sidewalks. Numerous anthropomorphic monsters crawled out of the abyss while an unknown voice explained, "They appeared everywhere. Along with these holes came life forms fundamentally different from humans. The invaders began to exterminate humanity, and when the world started turning into hell, they appeared." Continuing his story, the voice listed telekinesis, magical spells, freezing, light manipulation. There were people capable of wielding incredible powers. A tall brunette, standing at a half-turn, was lifting shards of glass into the air with golden magic. People who didn't die, even after receiving devastating blows or losing vital organs, added the narrator. On the screen appeared a sturdy man whose body was pierced through and through by numerous blades, those capable of changing shape, taking the form of a bear or wolf. "Werewolves," clarified the voice. A formidable bear engulfed in orange flames let out a furious roar. "And ordinary people who mastered special skills," concluded the voice, as a young woman with purple hair held a magical crystal in her hands. Frightened people, backing away, watched as a brave hero ran towards the monsters. At that moment, a voiceover announced, "Thanks to the superhumans who repelled enemies from the black hole, the world regained peace again." And the year when the gates opened was dubbed the Year of Terror. A crowd of ordinary citizens gazed in bewilderment at the glowing silhouette of a man. The voice explained, when the chaos subsided, public attention shifted to special kinds of beings. Rumors circulated that they spread dangerous particles, so quarantine and strict control were necessary. A majestic white government building stood against the backdrop of the television channel's emblem. The voice continued, "Fear of the unknown led to a division between special and normal people. Immortals became state property. A modern glass skyscraper towered over city streets." The narrator added, "And werewolves reached an agreement with an international corporation. 3 people standing nearby were talking quietly to each other." The voice reported, "Superhumans created their own organization and hid from the world's eyes using magic. 3 young people chatted peacefully in a hypermarket." The voice concluded, 20 years have passed since the Year of Terror. Today, they are still among us, hiding their true nature and pretending to be ordinary people." Standing with his phone in the hallway, a tall dark-haired guy hears, "Son." Without looking up from the screen, he lazily and without much interest replied, "Yeah?" To which a blue-haired man retorted, "I want to tell you something. Listen carefully and don't be surprised." Looking seriously at his son, the father announced like a bolt from the blue, "You're actually immortal." With slight bewilderment and doubt, the guy finally looked up from his phone and asked, "What?" The blue-haired man, standing in the hypermarket with a basket of groceries, began to explain, "I'm immortal, so my blood must have passed on to you." To which the dark-haired young man clarified confusedly, Why are you telling me this now while buying green onions? Without being distracted from choosing vegetables, the man instructed, Don't tell anyone. Your mother doesn't know either. His son couldn't help but say, You're telling me this in the middle of a supermarket. To which his father retorted, I said it quietly, so it's okay. Slightly bewildered, the guy objected, But immortals usually have perfect skin and handsome faces. To which his father, smiling faintly, replied, Well, yes, you don't really look like me, but you are still immortal. Without changing the subject, the man enthusiastically continued, Immortal blood awakens on your 24th birthday. Let's count the time. You were born at 11 o'clock, so is it today? The son, feeling growing confusion, exhaled, You're talking about this so calmly. While picking out groceries, the blue-haired man suddenly switched gears. And we also need garlic. The young man responded, Yes, but don't get minced. Mom wanted to do everything herself. I guess I'll have to peel it. Reaching for a pack of garlic, the man confirmed, Exactly, Gwangik, just don't tell Mom, he added, calling his son by name. Slightly darkening and looking at the floor, the man sadly admitted, Your mother doesn't know who I really am. Closing his eyes, he finished his thought with a sigh. If she finds out, it could lead to divorce. To which his son mumbled puzzledly, Father. Standing at the checkout under the curious gaze of the cashier, the guy whispered to his parent, Let's talk outside. When they left the hypermarket, the father went back to return the empty baskets, while the son took all the heavy bags on himself, lifting them without the slightest effort. Noticing this, the man smiled contentedly and remarked, My son is quite strong. Walking down the street, his father asked, Immortals are born with weak physical strength. Do you work out a lot? Laughing awkwardly, the guy thought to himself, Not really that much. Walking next to his father, the young man thoughtfully looked at the bags in his hands and, lifting one of them slightly higher, added to himself, My strength is probably from something else. It's my second secret. Walking down the twilight streets, the guy continued to think, No, actually it's the first thing I kept hidden. I have that too. When they returned home, his father opened the door and joyfully proclaimed, We're home. At that moment, a woman with burgundy hair came towards them. The son, however, didn't stop thinking about what he was hiding even before learning about his own immortality. Standing in the hallway with a kitchen knife in her hands, the mother cheerfully asked, Oh, you're back? The young man, meanwhile, continued to develop his thought. Another secret. She happily went towards her husband and, spreading her arms, clarified, Did you buy garlic? The man handed her the bags of groceries, confirming, Of course. Intertwining fingers with her husband, the woman meticulously asked, Not minced? He assured, Naturally. And the young man remained standing aside, observing this idyll. At a moment of tenderness when his parents kissed, the guy, feeling all the awkwardness in his skin, couldn't stand it. Hey, your son is actually watching. When his mother cheerfully told him to unpack the groceries, the young man thought, My mom is a shapeshifter. Immersing himself in memories, he resurrected a picture from 2 years ago when, completely bewildered, he asked her, Can you really transform? Standing next to her, he clarified, Like Sailor Moon? To which she replied, Like Deviltail. Looking at the gym, the guy was shocked and barely managed to ask, Wait, you weren't joking when you called yourself a shapeshifter, Mom? The woman calmly confirmed, Yes, I'm a shapeshifter, and so are you. Busy with her own affairs, she casually explained to her son, Shapeshifter's powers awaken at the age of 18. Your process will probably start tonight. The young man rubbed his face and sighed heavily. Well, that's unexpected. Finally, his mother added, And this is our secret from your father. The guy, tearing his palm away from his face, exclaimed in amazement, Huh? She lowered her gaze slightly sadly and asked, Never tell him, okay? Waking up from his memories, the guy began to put the groceries into the refrigerator when he heard, Son, what gift do you want? He calmly closed the door and said, Nothing. His mother didn't give up. Really nothing? You'll regret it later. To which his son replied, I am already grateful for giving me life. Touched by his words, his parents began to coo. Our son speaks so beautifully, just like his father. The man objected, No, he has a golden character, just like you. His son added in conclusion, Let's say both options. Looking at the tenderness and mutual adoration of his parents, the guy smiled slightly and thought, Father is immortal, mother is a shapeshifter. I really have a special family. Watching the peaceful family dinner and listening to his parents arguing over trivial matters, Oh my God, we're one candle short. Should I go buy some? The young man wondered, why are they both hiding their true nature from each other? Late at night, when the moon reigned in the sky, the guy wished, good night. In response, he heard, and to you, son. The young man slumped onto his bed in his room without any strength. Looking at his watch, the dark-haired young man muttered, it's almost 11 p.m. According to my father, that's when I should awaken as an immortal. He recalled again how earlier today, returning home with shopping bags, he had asked his father, Dad, did it hurt when you awakened? The blue-haired man looked up, as if recalling those events, and replied, it went smoothly for me. I felt my blood suddenly boil, then cool down almost immediately. As soon as a slight chill spread through my body, my senses became much sharper than before. Walking beside him, the young man clarified, and it didn't hurt at all? His father confirmed this. At that moment, the youth thought to himself, I felt like I was dying when I awakened as a shapeshifter. On their way home, he asked again, but Mom is just a normal person. Will I definitely awaken? To which his father confidently stated, you will. An immortal's blood is much thicker than human blood. For a moment, the man grew somber and, looking at the ground, said, and your father? Never mind, it doesn't matter. The young man merely looked at him with confusion but didn't ask any further questions. Returning to reality, the youth stared thoughtfully at the ceiling. Is it possible to become an immortal if I have already awakened as a shapeshifter? And what should I tell my father if nothing happens? Deciding to put those thoughts aside, he scratched his cheek and exhaled. Okay, never mind. Time for bed. Deep in the night, the young man suddenly fell from his bed onto the floor, writhing in unbearable pain and drenched in sweat. A thought flashed through his mind. Someone mentioned, shaking all over, he groaned indignantly, Father, you said it wouldn't hurt. And in his thoughts swirled, woe, that there were no invaders or black holes in the world before. Contorting from excruciating pain, the youth clutched his head as veins bulged on his hands. Falling to the floor again from a sharp attack, he continued to remember. No one knew about the existence of superhumans or immortals. It was just an ordinary world. Feeling a violent tremor shake his entire body, the young man thought, this story about my abnormal life. Overcoming the agony, he managed to open his eyes, which now glowed with a celestial blue fire, and finished his thought. In a normal world. He remembered how 2 years ago, approaching a mirror in the morning, he saw his changed athletic body. Then he breathed out in awe. Wow. Clearly pleased with the result, the young man smiled. I just awakened, but look at this body. Suddenly, his mother peeked into the bathroom and asked with an embarrassed expression, do you like it? Startled, the young man nearly jumped, exclaiming, ooh, ah, ah, ah. Quickly covering himself with his hands, he exclaimed indignantly, didn't they teach you to knock? His mother simply laughed in response. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. You look good. Looking at her son's back, the woman asked, so, what is it like being a shapeshifter? The young man responded more calmly. I feel like there's much more energy. It seems my hearing and sense of smell have also sharpened. Without changing the subject, the young man asked his mother, but why didn't you tell me anything? To which she replied with a puzzled look, huh? What do you mean? Recalling his torment when he felt death was near, he exclaimed indignantly, about losing all the hair on my body when I awakened. I vomited blood countless times, and my muscles felt like they were tearing apart. Why didn't you warn me it would be so painful? His mother, as if nothing had happened, replied in a completely calm voice, oh, that. I don't think knowing would have changed anything. To which her son merely grumbled, I would at least have been mentally prepared. Slightly calmed down, the son stepped towards his mother, clarifying, the awakening went successfully, right? It won't happen again? The woman, with her arms crossed on her chest, assured him, don't worry, it won't. This isn't some game after all. Letting out a relieved sigh and closing his eyes, the young man exhaled. What a relief. I never want to experience that kind of pain again. Never. He once again delved into memories of the night he awakened as an immortal, reliving the inhuman torment he had endured. Waking up the next morning, the youth froze in front of the mirror. He pinched his cheek and, grimacing, thought, it still hurts all over, even though I'm now immortal. Examining his reflection, he mused, there are no external changes, but as for my senses, I can see perfectly in the dark, and all my other sensations have been heightened to the limit. He hadn't finished his thought when a sharp noise pierced the silence outside the window. The young man instinctively covered his ears, realizing, my hearing has become too sensitive. Continuing to wince at the racket outside, he pressed his palms tightly against his ears and decided, I need to calm down. I spent a long time learning to control my body when I became a shapeshifter. Concentrating, the youth realized, if I consciously convince myself that the source of the sound is far away, letting out a relieved sigh as the discomfort subsided, the young man leaned against the sink and continued to ponder what it was like to awaken as an immortal. Looking in the mirror at his own reflection with blue flames now dancing in his eyes, he wondered, will I be able to control myself properly? At that moment, his father's voice came from the corridor. Gwangik, where are you? Come have breakfast. To which his son replied, coming. Entering the kitchen, the young man paused for a second in bewilderment, looking at a mountain of meat and vegetables. Is this breakfast? He clarified to his parents. Visibly delighted, he sat down at his place and beamed. I'm lucky. His mother immediately added, if you want, I can make more. Just say the word. Lowering his gaze into his plate, Gwangik lost himself in thought. If you think about it, our family eats a lot. I've heard that shapeshifters require more energy than ordinary people. But my father also eats for two. Maybe all special kinds have such an appetite. The head of the family, meanwhile, asked his wife, Honey, there seems to be less food than usual today. Are you all right? To which the woman calmly explained, There's another portion cooking in the rice cooker. It's almost ready. At that moment, Gwangik had a thought, and they don't even suspect each other. Distracting his son from his thoughts, his father turned to him. Ah, right, Gwangik. The young man raised his head and responded, Yes? Startling everyone present, the family patriarch proclaimed, Prepare for the civil service exams. His mother and son, interrupting each other, exclaimed in amazement, Civil service? So suddenly? Explaining his position, the man said to his wife, A great opportunity has come up. To which she retorted, And what is it? He should go to college. He's already 20 years old. Continuing the argument, the man insisted, No, college isn't the main thing. Real skills are more important. A civil servant job provides stability. I went through it myself, after all. His wife countered, I'm not saying it's bad. I just don't want him to lock himself away in a goshuan so early. Listening to his wife's argument, the man cut her off. He doesn't need to go to a goshuan. He is smart enough. Gwangik, watching this exchange, thought, They rarely disagree with each other about anything. Continuing to eat breakfast, the young man again became lost in his thoughts, staring at his plate. Immortals usually work for the government. Maybe my father is trying to get me a similar position, but my mother seems to have her own plans. He recalled going to the gym with his mother recently. There he was, reaching for the pull-up bar and counting. 15. Jumping down to the floor, the young man noticed with slight surprise, I could barely do 2 pull-ups before. Now I did 15 and didn't even get winded. His mother explained, A shapeshifter's strength is 3 times greater than a human's. Catching on to her words, the young man smirked. So that's why you're so strong. His mother, beaming and showing off the relief on her arm, winked. Regular training also plays a role, of course. While warming up his arms after exercising, his mother seriously remarked, There's something else shapeshifters excel at besides physical strength. Gwangik asked curiously, What is it? Becoming serious for a moment, the woman warned her son, A shapeshifter's instincts are much stronger than human ones. There will be many moments in your life when they try to take over you. Not giving much importance to her words, the young man mumbled doubtfully, Instincts? I don't feel anything like that. To which his mother replied, Not yet. But when you're out in the real world, it could become a serious problem. Jumping onto the pull-up bar, she continued, You need to learn self-control. That's why I want you to go to college and then get a job at a large company. Gwangik Yu asked in surprise, Huh? A company? Beginning to do pull-ups, the woman explained, Your grandfather has connections in the industry that works with shapeshifters. Just get into a decent college, and I can get you placed there. You'll receive the necessary basic training. Emerging from his memories, the young man heard his mother's voice. We should ask Gwangik himself, not decide everything for him. The son, with a mouthful of rice, merely mumbled in confusion, Huh? Putting his son in front of a choice, his father agreed. Well, let's ask Gwangik. Feeling awkward, the young man asked, Me? His mother confirmed, "Yes, Gwangik. Do you even want to become a public servant?" Setting down his spoon, Gwangik Yu pondered, "What do I really want? Of course, I have one goal, but if I think about it, I've never told anyone." Gathering his courage, Gwangik firmly stated, "I want to enroll in UDT." Both parents were momentarily speechless, a heavy silence falling over the room. His mother's eyes flashed with anger, and she snapped without concealing her fury. "Think again." "The military?" his father asked, puzzled. His mother instantly switched from anger to feigned calm, interjecting, "He must have just blurted it out without thinking." To which her son calmly retorted, "Mom, I'm 20. I'm perfectly capable of making adult decisions." Completely losing her composure, his mother threatened him with a fist and shouted, "I think you've completely lost your mind, son." His father, observing this scene, calmly remarked, "No, military service isn't a bad choice." His wife exclaimed in outrage, "What?" Turning her attention to her son, the woman inquired, "You didn't choose this just because of the uniform, did you?" Gwanik honestly admitted, "Well, that too." Continuing to reason with the same composure, his father added, "Yes, that's a significant plus. It would be even stranger if a 20-year-old was already eager to fight for his country." But his mother persisted. "But it's the army." His father patiently explained, "That's normal. Not all soldiers are sent to Somalia to fight pirates. After training and assignment, he'll have a good life. He'll have to serve anyway sooner or later, so it's better if he becomes an officer." His mother, slightly calmed down, sighed, "All right, if that's what you say." And Gwangik, watching this dialogue, admired, "Wow, Dad is good." Seeing the argument subside, the young man clarified, "So I can go ahead and do it?" His mother said sharply, "Yes, but not now." Anticipating her words, his son began to say, "Yes, I know. First, exams for college." But his father interrupted him. "No, first national service. It seems EduWill sponsors it or something." The man continued, "If you pass this exam, you can simply postpone entering the position and go into military service. And if you change your mind, you can work in the defense industry. In any case, an officer's rank will be a great bonus." His son merely said shortly, "Right." Listening to their conversation, his mother asked her husband with doubt, "Does it really work like that?" He confirmed, "Exactly." Gwangik pondered, "Logically, it seems impossible. But if my father takes on the task, he will definitely arrange everything." Returning to the meal, Gwangik declared, "Then I'll take this exam." His father sternly warned, "It's not impossibly difficult, but you can't pass it by slacking off." To which the young man confidently retorted, "That's no problem." The man, taking another bite of food, added, "Then clear your weekends. There's a man in Hwashong, Gyeonggi Province, who will give you a few valuable lessons. You'll be learning from him." Gwangik calmly responded, "Okay," but a moment later it dawned on him and he asked together with his mother in astonishment, "Wait, where?" Amidst a picturesque road surrounded by forest far from the hustle and bustle of the city, a bus stop stood still. A red bus slowly approached. As he boarded, Gwangik recalled his father's words. "There lives an old friend of mine there. He works on a farm and refuses to move to the city." The young man involuntarily wondered, how awesome must he be if I had to make such a journey for his lessons? Deciding to scroll through his phone, Gwangik continued to think, "I never thought I'd be taking an exam for public service, although my ultimate goal is still UDT." While browsing new messages, he confessed to himself, "To be honest, I didn't even want to become a regular soldier." Memories flooded back, the white hole in the ground, the gates that appeared shortly after the creation of the International Government Coalition. That's when Old Power was born. If the black hole is an exit, then the white hole is an entrance. He remembered, that means we can penetrate the world of invaders on the other side. There are unknown metals, exotic plants and animals hidden there. Before Gwangik's eyes appeared unseen creatures, shimmering ores, and exotic flora. The young man lazily looked out the window. Earth's black holes are a thing of the past, but humanity is still fighting over resources, and shapeshifters are usually thrown into these battles. Their incredible strength and endurance make them ideal fighters. Leaning his head against the glass, he thought, "Mom didn't want me to participate in these battles, so I compromised. I'll fulfill her wish and my desire to fight by becoming a soldier." Closing his eyes, Gwangik added to himself, "Initially, I didn't even plan to join the army. I wanted to do something more meaningful." Somewhere in the wilderness, a young man with chestnut hair, holding his phone to his ear, asked in surprise, "Yes, Sunbei? Huh? Your son? You sent him to me?" Surveying his land, the stranger continued talking to Guanggeek's father. "Exams? Ah, you want to prepare him for that. Well, all right, leave it to me." He kicked off one sandal and settled more comfortably on the veranda of his house. "No, I won't give him any favors just because he's your son. Don't worry, I'll train him properly." The stranger with chestnut hair carefully studied Guanggeek. Guanggeek stared back at him intently. Standing in the middle of a dense forest, the stranger asked, "Who are you?" The young man introduced himself. "I am Yu Guanggeek, son of Yu Yonho." But the stranger rudely interrupted him. "No, I didn't ask about that." Assessing the guest's physique, the man said, "You're immortal, aren't you? So why are you in such good shape?" Guanggeek, looking at himself, simply exhaled. "Ah?" Searching for an answer, Guanggeek suggested, "Well, probably because I'm a half-breed." The stranger clarified, "Mixed blood? It's usually very thick in immortals, especially considering who your father is." He genuinely wondered, how could human blood mix with it so much? Guanggeek hesitated. "Well, because..." Rubbing his neck, he reluctantly explained, "My mother also has thick blood." The stranger smirked slightly. "What a unique specimen." Turning towards the path leading into the forest, he said, "Never mind, let's go." Guanggeek asked, "Where?" The man replied, "Where do you think? You said you came for lessons." Recovering somewhat, the young man answered, right." Following deeper into the forest, Guanggeek thought, "If I believe my father, the place where I'm supposed to prepare for the exam is a mountain in a remote rural area near Huashang." Walking behind the stranger and looking at his back, he continued to think, "And this man seems to be my mentor." Looking around, Guanggeek noted, "Probably because he's immortal, his face is so clean and beautiful." Then he asked aloud, "Is there a temple or something around here?" Without turning around, the stranger snorted, "What nonsense!" Guanggeek immediately thought, "Then why are we going up the mountain?" Suddenly, the man stopped in front of some structure and, forcing the young man to stop, said, "Here we are." Seeing a dilapidated temple before him, cluttered with piles of weapons, training equipment, and other junk, Guanggeek simply breathed out, "Father?" Guanggeek, upon hearing the call to follow him, couldn't help but wonder, "What are you trying to teach your son?" As they walked along the path, the stranger inquired, "Have you awakened yet?" The young man briefly confirmed that he had. Sitting down and picking up a dry branch, the man asked, "Have you tested your abilities yet?" The boy admitted, "I tried making deep cuts on myself. It's not like there were no wounds, but they healed surprisingly quickly." Slightly scoffing, the stranger curiously inquired, "Do you know the very essence of how our bodies heal?" The young man simply shook his head. "Oh?" The stranger smirked in response. "To be honest, I don't really know either." Beginning to draw a diagram directly on the ground, the man explained, "Forget it. Listen carefully. Even if we don't understand all the intricacies, we know the basics of regeneration. First, there is overall health. A strong immortal has higher healing power." Accompanying the theory with drawings of amusing little figures, the stranger clarified, "Secondly, sensitivity. If you are receptive, you feel pain more acutely. But that's what allows you to instantly recognize damage and control it better. Simply put, you'll immediately notice if a bone is setting incorrectly or something like that." Completing the sketch, the man summarized, "In any case, training endurance and senses will significantly increase your healing power." Guanggeek, looking at the artwork, merely mumbled, "Uh-huh," while thinking to himself, "Wow, I can't decipher anything in these scribbles." Getting up from the ground, the stranger lazily said, "Any questions?" The young man responded, "Yes, I didn't quite understand one thing." The stranger simply raised an eyebrow questioningly. "And what is it?" Pointing behind him at a palisade of blades sticking out of the ground, the boy protested, "What does this have to do with anything? What am I supposed to do here?" Slightly turning away, the man snapped, "You're training your endurance and learning to control your body." Guanggeek flared up, "No way. I still don't understand the logic." Beginning to lose patience, the stranger growled, "Damn it, why are you so talkative? Do you want to pass the exam or not?" The boy, unwilling to yield, retorted, "Yes, the exam, but won't we be learning?" The man parried, "This is learning." Guanggeek wondered, "Isn't a notebook and pen needed for that at least?" Suddenly becoming serious, the man pronounced each word clearly, saying, "What are you even talking about? You're going to apply for special forces for immortals." Taken aback by this news, Guanggeek simply breathed out in confusion. What is this special forces? Looking around at the forest landscape, the stranger was surprised. Didn't Yonho Sanbei tell you anything? The young man quietly said, I just heard it was an exam for public service. Sitting down on the sand again, the man remarked, Really? Well, that's more like military service. Hearing this, the boy involuntarily thought, Dad, what about UDT? Abruptly changing the subject, the stranger stated matter-of-factly, So, are you going to apply or not? If not, get out of here. At such a statement, Gwangik froze for a moment. Scratching the back of his head, the young man decided, Ha! I'll only be able to do what I want after passing this exam. Okay, I'll do it. A voice called out to him, Hey, wait! Taking out old pink trousers, the man handed them over. If you don't want to ruin your clothes, take off your shoes and change into these. Gwangik froze in bewilderment once more. After a while, the young man, lightly tapping his bare foot, tried to cheer himself up. Well, nothing really changed. Standing before the start of the trial in these ridiculous pants, into which he had tucked his upper clothes, the boy looked at the path strewn with sharp blades. It's just that the exam topic turned out to be completely different than I expected, he thought to himself, and the stranger hurried him. Run faster. My neck is getting stiff from waiting. Looking at the upcoming trial, the boy took a deep breath, gathering his will. Maximally focused, Gwangik, with eyes burning with determination, took his first step. Screaming in sharp pain, he rushed along the obstacle course, while his instructor sat calmly on nearby stones, opening a can of food. Noticing that Gwangik had fallen silent, the man barked, Don't relax. Are you going to rest while an enemy is chasing you? As the young man overcame the agonizing distance, the coach continued his leisurely meal, comfortably settled on a boulder. After passing the first test, the boy collapsed onto the ground. Looking at his mangled crimson-stained legs, he gasped, Kill me! Just kill me! Approaching closer, the trainer remarked without a trace of sympathy, You deliberately avoided some of the blades in the center, didn't you? Good reflexes. Other guys couldn't dodge anything at all. Looking at the boy's legs, where wounds were already beginning to heal, enveloped in blue flames, the man admitted with surprise, Your healing ability is also impressive. While Gwangik, on all fours, tried to catch his breath, the instructor instructed, Your regeneration speeds up with each new healing. Don't avoid the blades. Step on them. Let there be more wounds. Developing the thought, the trainer insisted, Step on them deliberately. Cut your skin. Outraged, Gwangik only thought, What nonsense. This crazy bastard. The training continued, and the stranger urged him with shouts, Stop reacting. Run. Watching as Gwangik repeatedly overcame the obstacle course, the coach pondered, Who is this guy? Collapsing on the ground again, the youth cried out, Ka-ah! Showing no mercy, the man threw, Hey, you're immortal. You don't die from that. Get up and run again. Gwangik pitifully groaned, How long will this continue? To which the instructor retorted, You must experience shock. Looking at the crimson gleam of the blades, the trainer reasoned, Once you go through it the first time, your pain threshold will increase. This setup prepares you for panic and teaches your brain to work in a combat situation. But, slightly puzzled, the man wondered, Why aren't you going into shock? Doesn't it hurt? The boy retorted furiously, It hurts like hell. Again focusing, the youth thought, Before becoming immortal, I had the body of a shapeshifter. And since their bodies are incredibly resilient, something like this will never cause me shock, even if I do this for the rest of my life. Getting up from the ground, the boy asked, Are there other ways to achieve the desired result? The trainer clarified, How fast can you run 50 meters? The young man blurted out without hesitation, About 6 seconds. Assessing the length of the obstacle course, the man concluded, This distance is exactly 50 meters. If you complete it in 6 seconds, we'll consider the blade setting training finished. Taking a low starting position, the boy asked, Just 6 seconds? Okay. Grinning, the boy raised his gaze full of excitement and confidence and said, Just don't take back your words. Stepping with a bloodied foot onto the obstacle course, he thought, I said I could run 50 meters in 6 seconds. Thinking through the strategy, the youth continued to think, But that's if you run at a moderate pace. Feeling his instructor's gaze on his back, he crouched down and figured, It will hurt, but if I maximally dull my senses... Suddenly bursting forward and pushing off from the ground, he added to himself, And run as fast as I can. Rushing forward with a crazy look straight at the tips of the knives, he concluded, 6 seconds will be easy. Maintaining determination and not flinching once, Gwangik runs directly over the blades, but this time doesn't utter a single groan of pain. Having completed the test, he braced his hand on the ground, leaving a crimson trail behind him, and thought, Done. That was definitely faster than 6 seconds. Looking at the young man's back, the trainer, being in a slight shock from what he saw, muttered, "What an interesting guy." "Again! Repeat!" shouted the instructor to his back, to which Gwangik indignantly replied, "What?" "I didn't make it," the student asked desperately. The other casually tossed back without looking up from his phone, "I wasn't timing you." The young man cursed inwardly. Observing the picturesque forest, the coach announced, "Now let's move on to the second training." Handing Gwangik the heavy metal chain, he added, "Here, take this." Taking it in his hands, the young man pondered and asked, "What is this? A dog collar?" Pointing to the collar, the instructor said, "You will need it for the next stage. Put it around your neck." Upon hearing the command, Gwangik murmured with doubt, "This doesn't seem like a good sign. What are we going to do? Breath-holding training." His coach surprised him. Gwangik, who had almost put on the chain, froze in surprise and shock. Guessing where things were leading, Gwangik began with horror in his voice. But the coach, not letting him finish, cut him off. "Yes." Demonstrating a small remote with a red button, he explained, "When I press it, the collar will begin to tighten." When the boy began to slowly remove the collar, the coach ordered, "Don't even think about it. Fasten it back on. You went through the field of knives. Are you going to just give up and go home?" Squatting down again from irritation and helplessness, the young man exhaled with indignation. "Oh, can't I just dive underwater to hold my breath?" While Gwangik was crouching, the instructor began to scold him. "Do you think this is enough? This is endurance training for choking. In a real fight, it will all be over if you lose consciousness." Looking towards his home, he continued, "Just like with blades, you must learn to control the moment of losing consciousness. Over the years of war against special species, ordinary people have learned to resist us. Shouldn't this work in reverse as well?" Taking a short breath, the coach added sarcastically, "We used to train by hanging from trees. The world has become more humane." Gwangik thought to himself, "Don't you dare say it's gotten better at things like this." Sighing resignedly, the boy put on the collar and asked, "What are the conditions for completion?" "None," came the stern reply. "You will disconnect anyway, but you must hold out for at least 5 minutes." The young man bowed and responded, 5 minutes. Good." Continuing the briefing, the instructor added, "I also advise you not to try to rip off the collar by force or steal the remote if you don't want a hole in your chest. However, that could also be part of the training." The young man said briefly, "Understood." Watching him, the coach clarified, "So, are you ready?" Gwangik replied without much enthusiasm, "Yes." Pressing the red button, the instructor announced, "Good, let's begin." Instinctively clutching his throat and trying to catch even a drop of air, Gwangik fought against suffocation. His body trembled as he desperately clung to the remnants of consciousness. When he reached for his neck to unfasten the collar, the trainer indifferently struck his hand with a stick and snapped, "No!" Looking at Gwangik Yu's face gradually turning blue, the instructor said, "I see you are still holding on." As the young man was about to touch his head to the ground, the coach passing by calmly added, "But if it becomes completely unbearable, just switch off." Struggling with suffocation, Gwangik thought, "When will this end? I'm sure 5 minutes have long passed." Looking at the instructor's legs, he noticed darkness creeping into his eyes and his vision blurring. Consciousness is fading, flashed through his mind. Almost losing touch with reality, with rolled eyes and a bluish face, he thought with his last strength, "I'm finished." At the very last moment, the young man felt the collar around his neck loosen, allowing him to take a life-saving breath. As Gwangik greedily gulped air, rediscovering the taste of life, the coach merely grumbled indignantly, "What? Why did he disconnect?" Looking at the control panel with bewilderment, he said puzzledly, "Is the battery dead?" Catching his breath and regaining his voice, Gwangik shouted with accusation, "Won't, I almost died." The coach, putting the remote control in his pocket, reasonably remarked, "You wouldn't have died." Still pale, the boy pointed to the crimson marks on his neck and angrily rasped, "We're not going to repeat this because I didn't pass out, are we? I'm sure I lasted 5 minutes." Looking at his phone and calmly checking the data, the coach confirmed, "Yes, everything is correct. To be more precise, having delivered the shocking news to the boy who was still trying to recover and couldn't even stand up, the instructor added 12 minutes and 47 seconds. Being completely bewildered, Gwangik merely mumbled something incoherent. "Didn't he say the record was 8 minutes?" ran through his mind. Could it be that Finally, impressed with the result, the coach raised his brown eyes from under a mop of hair. His face showed excitement and satisfaction, which made Gwangik exclaim indignantly, "Please don't look at me like I'm a child looking at a new funny toy." Heading towards the small cabin in the rays of the setting sun, the man said, "Let's finish for today. Get some rest. You need to eat." Entering the house and glancing into the kitchen, Gwangik asked, "Are you going to cook something?" To which the instructor replied calmly, "Working on an empty stomach is inefficient. You need strength." Peeking out from behind the sliding door, the boy clarified, "Can I help with anything?" But he only received a dry reply, "Just sit." Breathing out quietly, Gwangik disappeared into the shadows and thought, "Well, I can't cook anyway. All that remains is to wait." After a while, the coach placed a pot on the table. Inside bubbled something purple and foul-smelling. It looked completely unfit for consumption. "Hey, eat," he ordered. Looking at his future meal, the boy widened his eyes, freezing in silent shock and disgust. Embarrassed by the sight of the dish, Gwangik cautiously inquired, "What's inside?" The trainer ironically asked back, "Are you sure you want to know?" "Probably not," the young man immediately cut him off. Deep at night, the moon dimly illuminated this wild, god-forsaken forest. Standing in only pink shorts by a rocky river, the boy wrung out his t-shirt. "Next time, I'll have to cook for myself," he mused. "When I return, I will definitely ask my mother to teach me." Emerging from the water onto the forest path, Gwangik threw a wet cloth over his shoulder and continued to ponder. "No, first I need to ask my father about this. I would call him right now, but..." Climbing over the last boulder on the way to the cabin, he exhaled wearily. "I'm so exhausted. I just want to get some sleep." Having reached home and found his sleeping spot on the floor, the boy noticed that complete darkness reigned inside. When he asked his teacher about it, the latter merely mumbled dryly through sleep, "All the beetles in the area will flock to the light." And that's terribly annoying. Heaving a sigh of hopelessness, the boy resignedly settled into his place next to the instructor. Before Gwangik could fall asleep, the trainer decided to explain. "This training is necessary to dull your sense of touch. Heightened senses make you feel anxiety and discomfort much more strongly than others. At first, you will hardly be able to close your eyes because of this feeling." Glancing back for a moment, the man realized that the student hadn't heard half of his explanation. He had already fallen fast asleep long ago. On the following morning, when the sun was already flooding the sky with light, the trainer shook Gwangik awake. "Hey, rise and shine. Breakfast is ready." Seeing something that provoked nausea rather than appetite before him, the young man resignedly mumbled, "Thank you for the meal." Not at all embarrassed by the stench of his own culinary masterpiece, the instructor began to eat. "Immortals spend a lot of energy. Eat up," he tossed off, to which Gwangik reluctantly responded, "Okay." Still hesitant to touch his plate, Gwangik inquired, "What kind of training awaits us today?" The trainer dryly replied, "Cliff jumping. Another bout of madness," the young man commented. As Gwangik finally forced himself to start breakfast, the teacher began to explain. "In flight, you hold your breath, focusing on your sensations just before impact." The young man pondered and clarified. "Judging by yesterday's and today's lessons, an immortal in battle should most fear shock and pressure from a powerful blow, which can cause loss of consciousness, right?" Confirming his assumption, the trainer added, "Yes, and something else. You must ensure that your mobility isn't impaired if you take a hit to the legs. Therefore, arms are the shield of an immortal." Clenching his fist and demonstrating with his own example, he continued, "Present your arm to a blow that could incapacitate you, for instance, if they aim for your head or legs." Without interrupting his reasoning, the instructor added, "Furthermore, a knife is sometimes more dangerous than a gun, and you should also beware of mines and claymores." Gwangik verbally confirmed he understood, but secretly smirked. "All this information is outdated." Urging on his student, the trainer snapped, "What are you fiddling with? Eat faster, it's time to go." "Okay," the young man said curtly. Recalling yesterday how the teacher pushed him off a mountain and how he landed on hard ground with his entire body, Gwangik thought, "That's how my training ended." As soon as the cliff jumping finished, the trainer dryly said, "Leave," and ushered him out of the forest. Having finished recalling the events of the past few days, the young man was already riding home on a bus the next morning. Approaching the stopped red bus, Gwangik immediately reached for his phone. Settling into the cabin and dialing his father's number, he heard in the receiver, "Hey, son." Gwangik immediately got down to business. "Father, are you sure you gave me the correct address?" "What's wrong? Something happened?" his father asked anxiously. Heaving a sigh and frowning, the young man replied, "He made me jump off a cliff." His father calmly retorted, "Son, Everything is fine. You're an immortal. It's not easy to kill you, so don't fuss over your body. Listening to his father's instructions and watching the road flash by outside the window, Gwangik heard, "Only then will you know your limits." "All I've learned is that I'm damn durable," he ironically thought. Trying to cheer up his son, his father added, "In any case, you did well. Rest at home." "So what kind of exam am I taking?" the young man asked last. Just as his father was about to answer, Gwangik heard someone shout in the background, "Sunbei, help! That's it, I'm hanging up." "We'll talk later," his father quickly said. Deciding not to bother himself, the young man leaned back on the seat and closed his eyes. "Nothing will change if I find out the answer right now," he thought. "I'll just rest today, as my father advised." Gwangik began to fantasize about taking a hot foam bath and then settling down with his favorite console. Continuing to daydream, he already imagined the taste of homemade food from his mother and falling asleep for 12 hours. Gwangik was in an excellent mood. Anticipating his return home, he literally glowed while sitting on the bus, happily pondering, "Oh yes, the perfect plan for a day off." Upon returning home, his mother met him at the door. Adjusting her apron, she declared unequivocally, "You'll take a shower later. We need to go somewhere." The young man almost physically felt all his dreams of peace crumble from just one phrase. "Huh?" was all he could utter in response. His mother already ushered him out of the house, handing him a pre-packed suitcase. "I discussed everything with your father," she said sharply. "You still need to prepare for college. Here are your things." "I can study myself," Gwangik protested. "Wait, what suitcase?" Handing her son the luggage, the woman stunned him with the news. "I found you a tutor nearby, in the neighboring district." Gwangik was still trying to process what he had heard when his mother added, "You'll spend 2 nights there. Keep that in mind." "What?" ran through his head. "I have a very bad feeling about this." After some time, an ordinary residential high-rise loomed before the young man. As Gwangik pressed the elevator call button, his mother said, "I'll pick you up in 2 days." Entering the cabin, he glanced over his shoulder and asked, "Aren't you going to introduce me? Shouldn't we meet the tutor?" "It's okay," she replied mysteriously. "What? In what sense?" the young man wondered. The elevator doors began to close slowly, and his mother said with a smile at the last moment, "Being simply smart isn't enough." As her figure almost disappeared behind the steel doors, her final words reached him, "You also need a strong body." As soon as the doors completely cut him off from his mother, Gwangik realized everything. He understood what awaited him. Finding himself in a hopeless situation like trapped, the young man turned pale. This definitely won't be studying. Realizing the gravity of the situation, he nervously laughed out of desperation. "Cursed life," he bitterly smirked to himself. Reaching the correct floor, Gwangik froze in stunned silence before the open elevator doors. Finally deciding to step out, he cautiously began to look around. To his right stretched rows of treadmills, and to his left loomed racks with dumbbells and weights. "This is a gym," the young man breathed. Assessing the scale of the room, he involuntarily wondered, did they convert the underground parking lot for this? Suddenly, a voice sounded from somewhere nearby. Gwangik flinched and turned his head towards the stranger. "So it's you," she said. The young man froze in shock, unable to tear his eyes away from the figure that had appeared. He was so surprised that he even slightly opened his mouth, not knowing what to answer. Standing before him was a fit, athletic girl with chestnut hair and amber eyes. "Sulhi's son?" she asked casually. Rubbing his neck awkwardly, Gwangik confirmed, "Yes, that's me, but I don't quite understand why Mom sent me here." "She warned you would stay for 2 days of training, right?" the girl countered. "Your physical potential will be wasted if you only use your brains like a typical bookworm," she critically noted. The young man remembered his past trainings, which were more like tortures, and darkened. "I can't even tell the truth here. It's terribly unfair." He recalled the boxing ring and his mother standing opposite him. Gwangik remembered her main principle. Since childhood, the philosophy of upbringing in their family has been simple. If you don't listen, you will be punished with all severity. You must take responsibility for your actions. Looking at his mother's stern face, which promised nothing good, he continued to think. When you live with such settings for 20 years, you start to perceive them as a given. Try to rebel, and you'll immediately get a lesson in strictness. While the girl frowned and fiddled with some equipment, Gwangik sighed heavily. Refusal won't be accepted here, either, will it? It's clear from her gaze. Snapping him out of his thoughts, the girl threw something at him. Here, take this. Examining the strange device in his hands, Gwangik confessed, I already have a phobia of these things. What is it? A regular measuring instrument, she explained. Put one on your wrist and another on your ankle. Being somewhat confused, the young man fastened the bracelets and asked, Aren't you going to start training me right away? First, we need to run some tests, the interlocutor said sharply. How exactly, he clarified. The girl pointed towards the exercise machines. You'll see soon enough. Nodding towards the treadmill, which was already running at a decent speed, she commanded, Run. Without hesitation, Gwangik Yu jumped onto the belt, trying to keep pace. The girl, meanwhile, intently recorded something on her phone. Not looking up from the screen, she reproached, I heard you've completely abandoned training. While the guy was exhausted, the trainer stated disappointedly, You are really out of shape? Your pulse is normal, which means the sensors are working properly? But is this truly your limit? Not understanding where all the bitterness in her voice came from, Gwangik Yu thought resentfully, and what's she mocking me for? Sighing heavily, the girl added, What laziness, it's astonishing. It's all because everything is served on a silver platter in the modern world, isn't it? Aren't we peers? Flashed through the guy's mind. Continuing to run, he reasoned, although no, immortals and shapeshifters age slowly. Maybe she's much older than she seems? Barely catching his breath, Gwangik Yu forced out, How long do I have to keep running? Don't stop, she threw back. Keep moving. Rubbing her neck, the girl began to explain the plan of action. First cardio, we will consistently improve your body. Looking at the guy with undisguised excitement and a fighting spirit, she proclaimed, I'll make you a new person from head to toe. Gwangik Yu, slightly taken aback by such a statement, responded, I don't want another mother. The girl, clearly amused by his reaction, asked, Is that because you are Selhie Kang's son? You seem to like joking. But the guy noted to himself that it wasn't a joke at all. Time flew by unnoticed. Early morning gave way to late evening, and one by one the lights began to turn on in the windows of the high-rise residential building. Despite many hours passing, the young man continued to exhaust himself on the treadmill. The girl, not impressed by his perseverance, dryly said, Don't stop. Even my grandmother wouldn't get tired at this pace. Feeling exhaustion creeping up, the guy heard a short command, Time! Gasping for air, he exhaled. 14 hours, 4 minutes, 30 seconds. Feeling his strength leaving him, the young man looked forward with a crazy, doomed gaze. To think I have to run all night without a break, flashed through his mind. Even during the Immortals training, there were moments of rest. Walking around him with the remote in her hands, the instructor noted, Fighting relying only on your body's instincts? Without proper preparation, that is nothing more than an amateur level. Turning on the TV right in front of the treadmill, she ordered, Listen and watch carefully. Nigh, passing by again, the girl explained, These are stretching exercises that we will do later. Remember them. Gwangik Yu, looking at the screen, was struck with thought. What the heck? Is a human body even capable of bending like that? Dryly commenting on what was happening, she cut off. You must develop flexibility. A stiff body is weakness. The guy only wondered to himself, but how? Continuing to run without stopping, he pondered. I wish I could ask, but there's not enough breath. Even with a shapeshifter's body after 14 hours of continuous running, you start to suffocate. Hearing the sharp, commanding voice, Time! Gwangik Yu immediately croaked, 14 hours, 10 minutes, and immediately added to himself, I need to constantly keep track of time in case she asks. Watching the stretching video, the young man realized, moreover, I must remember every movement on the screen. Listening to the instructor's instructions, he continued to reason, and at the same time, listen to the teacher. What a cruel training. Not losing his fighting spirit, Gwangik Yu with burning blue eyes rushed forward. But I will endure, he decided. A recent training session with the immortal mentor flashed in his memory. Sitting at the foot of the mountain, he then asked, How do you feel? While the student rested on the ground, the trainer instructed him, It seems you know how to block feelings, but that's not enough. If you suppress them too much, your movements will become erratic. Twirling a finger at his temple, the master continued, Clear your mind of the feeling you want to block, but at the same time make another one sharper. As the memory faded, the last words echoed in his consciousness. In other words, you need multitasking of feelings, Gwangik Yu realized. Now he was simultaneously breathing in rhythm with the marathon, keeping track of time, memorizing movements from the screen and listening to the teacher. And all this, while running. Continuing to perform all tasks, he reasoned, separately, these are 4 different things, but running is done by my body, and the instructions in video don't overlap each other. Except for keeping track of time, it's not that difficult to cope with the rest. After some time, the guy counting seconds joyfully exclaimed, 24 hours. Immediately stopping and leaning his hands on the treadmill rails, Gwangik Yu breathed out blissfully, finally it's over. The girl, slightly smiling, approvingly praised, your brain is in perfect order. When the next day came, and the sky above the high-rise building turned a delicate blue, the instructor commanded, relax. Flexibility is essential. The young man obediently nodded. Spreading rubber mats to the side of the machines, she instructed, remember the video you watched? I'll be showing it, so follow each of my movements. Kneeling down, the girl effortlessly arched her back, bending so that her hands touched the mat. Gwangik Yu looked at this with undisguised amazement. Raising his eyebrows in shock, he only blurted out, wow, and added to himself, such flexibility with her build is just unbelievable. Descending onto his own mat, Gwangik Yu heard a suggestion, now it's your turn. Trying to repeat the movement, the guy froze halfway, unable to bend any further. The instructor warned, don't overdo it, flexibility takes time. While he desperately tried to fold, she explained, we will gradually increase the amplitude by repeating the same pose day after day. In other words, we slowly stretch and rebuild muscle fibers. Gwangik Yu, latching onto these words, realized, so healing micro-traumas in muscles will speed up the process. When this thought struck him, he reasoned, then I don't need to be careful, right? After all, immortals recover instantly. Summoning his willpower, Gwangik Yu forced his body to bend completely, which greatly shocked the girl. I just need to endure a momentary pain, he finished his thought. Watching what the guy was doing to himself, the instructor froze for a moment. Cold sweat broke out on her face, and horror reddened her eyes as she exclaimed, hey, are you okay? She was indignant. I told you not to overdo it. Who taught you to be so stubborn? The young man only replied calmly, yes. Enduring the sharp pain, Gwangik Yu looked at her from below and calmly clarified, but I did it, didn't I? Seeing that he was okay, the girl just breathed a sigh of relief, after which she puzzledly muttered, wow, what an interesting specimen. Taking juicy meat on the bone out of the oven, she proclaimed, that's enough for today. Let's eat. Looking bewildered at the huge portion, Gwangik Yu was amazed. Are we going to eat a whole pig? The instructor dryly retorted, yes, this is my serving. Taking another such carcass, she pointed, and this one is yours. The young man thought in astonishment, a whole pig for one person? Putting on rubber gloves, the girl smiled slightly and smirked. Food is also part of training. Get used to storing enough energy for future loads. Gwangik Yu, hearing such a statement, only thought, are you a bear coming out of hibernation? Not distracting himself from his meal, the girl continued to devour the meat with relish, clearly urging Gwangik Yu to follow her example. Trying to keep up and stuffing large portions of food into himself, the young man heard an instruction. Don't bother cleaning up the dishes, just leave them there. 2 days a week is too little. There's barely enough time to grasp the basics. Gwangik simply confirmed that he understood, but inwardly noted with delight. How delicious. Just ordinary roasted pork with spices, yet what a taste. The conversationalist, without interrupting her meal, strictly warned, eat everything clean, leave even a scrap and you'll regret it. Gwangik calmly responded, I've been taught since childhood not to leave food behind. Yet, continuing to devour his dinner, he couldn't help but marvel. Maybe it's because I was hungry all day, but this is simply divine. Having finished her meal much earlier than her protege, the girl lazily got up and, while he diligently finished off the last pieces, tossed a farewell. I'm leaving. When you're done, wash your face and go to sleep. Some time later, the young man was left alone in the dark, empty room, where instead of bed stood only 2 massive concrete blocks. Trying to find some positives in this situation, he encouraged himself. Well, it's still better than being mosquito bait in the forest. Taking out his phone, Gwangik continued to ponder in silence. And unlike that teacher with a stick, I'm at least allowed to use my phone. Should I call Mom? Dialing a familiar number, he almost immediately heard a beloved voice. Oh, son, how are you? Is everything all right? The young man quickly assured her, yes, everything is fine, don't worry. Though inwardly he fondly thought, she's still worried about me after I left. However, the woman continued, I told her 100 times not to go easy on you just because we've known each other for so long. Slightly taken aback by this turn of events, Gwanggik braced himself for anything, but then his mother confessed, "But I still can't shake off my anxiety." Surprised, he asked again, "What?" Sharply changing her tone and suppressing any displays of tenderness, the woman cut him off. "If she's too lenient with you, tell her to push you harder, understand? All right, your father is here, and I'm busy." Receiving neither sympathy nor support, the young man paled in despair and exhaled, "But Mom, how can you do this? Don't you worry about your son at all?" Lost in memories of how he pulled heavy dumbbells while being yelled at by his coach, Gwanggik came to a certain conclusion. After the second day of training, I realized something. If the path of the immortal is about working on one's mentality, then the path of the shifter is pure physics and perseverance. How many kilograms can you bench press? What's your maximum in the 3 basic exercises? Knowing your limits and exceeding them, that's what it's all about. Recalling endless runs, he continued to reason. Besides, the training for shifters is backed by science, a ton of sensors and apps. In any case, the main conclusion I came to was simple. His thoughts were interrupted by his instructor's voice. Looking at the tablet with disappointment, she stated discouragingly, "Your reflexes are useless." Placing a barbell with weights in front of Gwanggik Yu, she commanded, "Lift it." The young man, estimating the weight, thought to himself, 20 kilograms on each side, 60 total, including the bar. Easily lifting the weight to his chest, he noted, "Lifting it is child's play. A shifter's strength is 3 times that of an ordinary person." The girl dryly interrupted his thoughts. "Carry it behind me." The young man slowly walked after his instructor. Turning around over her shoulder, she soon added, "And now run." Gwanggik Yu stared at her in surprise, but she simply repeated, "Run." Looking at what awaited him ahead, he asked confusedly, "Run?" Seeing a single narrow white beam that he had to cross, the young man inquired, "Here." After which he worriedly thought, "Is this another part of the crazy marathon after those blade training sessions?" When he resignedly looked down, the girl began to give instructions. "Keep your balance, always control your center of gravity, and otherwise rely on your reflexes." Gwanggik Yu doubtfully asked, "Will that work?" The instructor simply said, "You'll keep repeating it until it does." Assessing the obstacle, Gwanggik clarified, "It's okay if I fall, right?" While frantically thinking to himself, "Did they use the entire basement length? The distance is enormous, and the width of the beam is barely half my foot." Sitting nearby watching a series, the girl responded, "The height is 3 meters. The risk of serious injury is low, but don't think about falling and preparing for it. A shifter's primary task is to protect their own body." Heaving a sigh and closing his eyes, the young man listened to her explanation. "On the battlefield, injuries are detrimental to us because our bodies do not heal on their own like those of immortals." At that moment, Gwanggik smirked inwardly. "Yeah, right. The teacher is sitting there watching Netflix and talking about safety, but I'm an immortal, and even broken bones will heal instantly for me." Making a sharp dash with the barbell in his hands directly onto the narrow beam, he resolutely prepared himself. "So I'll run, even if falling is inevitable." Distracting herself from the screen, the girl raised her eyes and began to watch with obvious amazement what her student was doing. Activating his abilities and focusing all his attention on his feet, the young man noted, "My senses are heightened to the extreme. Touch allows me to feel the pressure of my sneakers on the skin and perfectly maintain balance." Sweating profusely but continuing to move forward towards the coveted edge, he reasoned, even though shifters have incredible reflexes, they can't compare to immortals whose specialty is precisely sensation and perception. Having reached the opposite end of the basement and successfully completing the test, Gwanggik concluded, "I did it, and it was even fun. Besides, there's no risk of a hidden blade piercing my foot here." Standing on the other side, he turned to his coach with the barbell in his hands and reported, "I'm finished. Everything went smoothly." Dampening his enthusiastic spirit, the girl dryly said, 2 more laps back and forth." Gwanggik Yu, whose enthusiasm had noticeably waned, simply exhaled, "Okay," and ran back. Suspecting something was amiss, the instructor pondered, "The width of the board is only 4 centimeters, and the length is 50 meters. And he crossed it without even faltering once?" Deciding to verify her suspicion, she replaced the beam with a thin wire stretched across the entire gym and announced, "We're raising the difficulty level." Looking at the new task, the young man turned pale with shock. "A wire?" Gazing at the thin thread, he uncertainly asked, "I have to run on this?" The coach, descending to the lowest part of the basement, calmly confirmed, "Yes, it's within normal limits. This is called a single-line setup." Occupying herself with her own affairs and spreading mats on the floor, she casually explained, "The wooden board was just a warm-up. Looking at your form, I thought you were out of it, but apparently you have an innate talent. Excellent balance." Noticing that the girl had laid enough soft padding on the concrete, Gwangik clarified, "Mats this time?" The instructor nonchalantly explained, "The wire is strong, it won't break, so be careful when falling. If you grab it with your hands, you'll cut your skin, so just fall down." Finally, Gwangik asked, "Do I have to run now?" The girl advised, "Try without the weight first." The young man, staring into the emptiness below his feet, thought, "Once I get used to the start, I'll have to run with the barbell. But there's no fear. After training as an immortal, this weight feels like a feather." Putting aside the barbell and starting the exercise on the wire, he focused all his attention on each movement, noting, "But in terms of difficulty, this is a real hellish level, much harder and thinner." Taking a step forward, Gwangik felt that the support barely bent and added, "But it's stretched tightly, it doesn't shake much." Continuing training and cautiously looking around, Gwangik tried to calm his anxiety. He kept telling himself, "This isn't falling off a cliff and there's no hurricane here." Looking down at where the mattresses lay, the young man took another step and added, "There's even cushioning on the floor." Feeling more confident and fully focused, he decided, "It's not scary at all." Gathering courage and using the power of a shapeshifter, the young man accelerated, deciding to himself, "I'll just try running." Quickly realizing his mistake, he began to look around in panic, trying to regain his balance. Gwangik-yu's confidence wavered, and he thought, "Maybe I should go slower." Taking a careful step, the young man was able to move forward calmly. But as soon as he dared to speed up and make a sharp dash, the wire beneath him instantly bent, knocking the ground out from under his feet. Under the strict gaze of his instructor, Gwangik-yu slowly and carefully made his way to the far end of the basement, exerting all his effort to maintain control over his body. Noticing the burning, interested look of the coach, who didn't take her eyes off him, he involuntarily remembered, "That day, the teacher looked at me as if I were more interesting than any video. She made me run along a line with a plank all day, and everything repeated itself the next morning." On the last day of training, the girl, seeing her student to the street, threw after him, "See you next week." Gwangik-yu, standing with his suitcase, respectfully bowed and replied, "Yes." His mother was waiting nearby, standing by the car. Seating his son in the car and pulling onto the road, the woman addressed him, "Gwangik." Carefully watching the road, the mother inquired, "Are you curious why I'm making you go through this?" The boy blurted out without hesitation, "Of course." With a hint of indifference in her voice, not distracted from driving, she explained, "I can't bear to watch my son get beaten up." The young man exclaimed in astonishment, "Huh?" The woman continued her thought, "You need to know the limits of your body. Right now you are too weak." Gwangik, shocked by her words, remembered effortlessly knocking out a classmate in front of everyone and thought, "Who's weak? Mom, if my friends hear this, they'll faint from shock." Leaning back on the seat and gazing thoughtfully at the ceiling, he reasoned, "Well, since things are already like this, I can get some more training. When I join UDT, I will be able to help, not hinder, though that immortal special forces unit my stick-wielding teacher talked about worries me." As they approached their home, Gwangik uncertainly asked himself, "I'll definitely be able to get into UDT, right?" Returning home, the boy devoured so much food in a matter of minutes that a mountain of empty plates grew on the table. Finishing his meal, he happily said, "Thank you, it was very delicious." Looking at the pile of dishes, his mother asked in astonishment, "Have you been starving for days?" Gwangik, beaming with pleasure, replied, "It wasn't until 4 days ago that I realized how valuable your cooking is, Mom." As the woman carefully stacked the plates into the dishwasher, her son added, "Ah yes, Mom, I want to learn to cook." She glanced over her shoulder and asked, "Cook?" The boy explained, "Sexy male chefs are all the rage these days. Please teach me. I want to be able to cook for my future wife." Slightly frowning and giving him a serious look, his mother retorted, "A sexy chef is nice, but first, don't you think you need that sexy part?" Hinting at his stomach, which he had filled in one sitting, she added, "With an appetite like that, you'll more likely become a pig chef." Gwangik, rubbing his full belly, dreamily responded, "My mom is as witty as ever." The woman sharply cut him off. "No, I'm serious. Stop relying solely on the shapeshifter's abilities and eating all day long. Remembering the face of the stick-wielding teacher, which literally lit up at the thought of dubious food, the boy thought, I remembered that dish from the man of nature, and then the instructor's eyes sparkled. From these memories he plaintively whimpered, and yet, cooking first. Giving in to his insistence, the mother sighed, fine. Having achieved his goal, Gwangik decided, okay, food issue closed. Leaning back on his chair and gazing thoughtfully into the distance, he pondered, training? I can't do anything about that. What will we be doing next week? The same thing again? As night gradually painted the sky a deep blue and the moon rose above the horizon, the young man wondered, or will there be a new type of test? At this very moment, on the other side of town, his trainer was polishing a huge, sharp machete by candlelight. The boy, meanwhile, thought peacefully, whatever we do, as the instructor, with a gaze mixed with excitement and madness, admired his new weapon gleaming in the dim light. Gwangjik continued, it's unlikely to be any harder than what we've already been through. After a while, Gwangik found himself once again at the top of the cliff, falling from a great height for the umpteenth time. Crashing to the ground and feeling his body turn crimson, he remembered the teacher's words. After a 4-day break, the instructor stated that previous training was just basic preparation, not included in the main requirements. Clutching at the earth, which was already soaking with his blood, the boy continued to reason. In other words, blade field, cold resistance, and cliff jumps are now part of the mandatory program. When he barely managed to lift his head, his entire body was covered in terrible bruises and scrapes. Holding his head and feeling a scarlet veil over his face, Gwangik finished his thought. I completed the last course by throwing myself into the abyss. Slowly regaining consciousness and breathing heavily after the fall, he thought, perhaps it's all about the shapeshifter's body, but despite the pain, this course quickly became easier for me. Grumbling from the top of the cliff, the trainer called out to his student, hey, get up already if you're done wallowing. Gwangik, looking up at the instructor, acknowledged, of course, the problem is that it's just a base. Looking at the boy with his brown eyes, the teacher drew his machete and held it in front of him, preparing to strike. He explained, one of the advantages of immortality is regeneration. A bullet from a pistol is nothing. It either goes straight through or you simply push it out, restoring your flesh. But cold weapons are quite a nuisance. It takes time to regenerate an amputated limb. The young man resignedly muttered, that's why you told me to be careful. Wielding the steel blade before him, the trainer continued, you can afford to take damage at close range, but you must avoid such attacks. Gwangik, watching the instructor's hand movements with horror, thought, goodness, he swings like a real killer. Observing the gleaming blade, the boy asked in a trembling voice, so that's why you took out the weapon. The trainer threw back, what did you think? Finally decided to use your brain. Following the man, Gwangik thought, right, this training is a continuation of learning to wield a blade. That means you don't just have to avoid the blade, but accept it. At that moment, the trainer, with a look full of determination and cruelty, swung his arm and commanded Omedarapsh. Parry! Dodging one strike after another, the boy jumped back as steel whistled through the air. Relentlessly following him with eyes burning with madness, the instructor said, your goal is to avoid serious wounds, taking only minor scratches. Looks like you're pretty well put together. I'll start easy. Gwangik responded with doubt in his eyes. Okay, but he thought to himself, how can anyone possibly dodge that? With these words, the trainer rushed towards him. In a flash, he was next to him and delivered an accurate strike, leaving deep marks on Gwangik's shoulder and chest before the boy could even react. Not losing a second, the trainer slashed at Gwangik's thigh with his blade, commanding, if I aim for your calf muscles, take the hit with your shin. Immediately after that, the man slashed across the boy's arm, leaving a deep wound, and explained, or move it away. Stepping back, the wounded young man covered his face with his injured hand. Watching every movement of the instructor, he thought to himself, you'll get a counterattack, at least I've prepared my blade. Gaining some time, the boy channeled his strength into healing. His hand was enveloped in blue flames, initiating the regeneration process. With eyes filled with madness and dangerous orange glow, the trainer raised the bloodied machete again and rasped, you recover quite quickly. Let's continue. Before Gwangik could heal his wounds, he saw the instructor rushing towards him once more. With a swift movement, the trainer delivered another blow, staining the student's clothes crimson. When Gwangik, completely exhausted, collapsed to the ground trying to regain his senses, the man threw back his head and sighed heavily. Anemia, one of the weaknesses of immortality. The young man, without thinking, asked, "So you carry bags of blood for transfusions?" The instructor calmly confirmed, "Usually yes. It's better to stop the bleeding in advance." Hearing this, the boy was amazed. "Wait, are you serious?" While Gwangik lay there recovering from his severe injuries, the trainer offered, "Let's take a lunch break." The student immediately responded, "Oh, I'm cooking today." The man dryly clarified, "And what are you going to cook? Instant ramen again." But the young man just shook his head. Entering the house, Gwangik took out spices, a gas stove, a knife, and vegetables, preparing everything he needed. After a while, he presented a delicious plate of pasta with thick meat sauce on the table. Spaghetti with meat sauce by Yu Gwanik. Taking some spaghetti on his fork, the trainer tried it and froze in astonishment. Chewing, the man sitting opposite Gwangik, with a slight smile, admitted, "This is tasty." The young man, just starting to eat his portion, sarcastically quipped, "Oh, at least your taste buds are working." Not understanding the humor, the instructor asked, "What?" Gwangik explained. "Just thinking out loud. Immortals have heightened senses. And even though your receptors are very sensitive, you can still enjoy food." Increasingly eagerly devouring the student's cooking, the trainer mumbled with his mouth full, "Cooking is also a kind of training." The young man was genuinely surprised. It was training? While eating greedily, the instructor instructively said, "You need to dull your sense of taste." Hearing this, Gwangik, not really believing the teacher, muttered, "Oh, of course, I understand." Finishing his meal and going back outside into the open air, the trainer commanded, "Let's go again." When Gwangik stood opposite him, he clarified, "Again?" The man, approaching with a blade in his hand, stated, "You're used to taking hits on your arm muscles. Therefore," without saying another word, the trainer took 2 steps and swiftly plunged the blade into the student's body. From the sudden burst of pain, the boy widened his eyes, freezing in stunned shock. Deeply plunging the steel, the trainer, under the desperate scream of the young man, coldly said, "It's time for internal organ regeneration training." When Gwangik Yu fell to his knees, clutching his wounded chest and trembling, the instructor drew his blade and added, "Hold on, organ regeneration takes time. Therefore, basic strength training is essential." Coming to himself, Gwangik, sweating profusely, gasped out, barely able to speak, "I couldn't dodge. No premonition. And how did you do that?" The instructor responded calmly, "I concealed my presence. If an opponent has sharp senses, you need to be able to hide your energy." Hearing this, the young man exhaled in astonishment. "And how do you do that?" Still trembling all over, Gwangik protested, "Forget it. If you're going to inflict a wound on me, you could at least warn me." The trainer merely smirked. "I can hear you, actually." Removing his hand from the wound, which was closing before his eyes, the young man murmured in surprise, "Huh? It's almost healed. Didn't you pierce me intentionally for regeneration training?" Ignoring the question, the man lazily inquired, looking at him, "Yes, that's right, but, don't you want to learn how to conceal your energy?" Recovering from the pain, the young man looked up at his teacher and shouted with determination, "Yes!" 2 days later, the elevator once again carried Gwangik Yu to the underground floor B2. Entering inside, he stood straight and spoke in a calm voice, "Teacher, I'm here," and began searching for her with his gaze in the hall. While Gwangik was looking around, a girl standing slightly away aimed a pistol at him, choosing him as her target. Turning to her, Gwangik clarified, "Is this a survival game today?" The girl, without lowering her weapon, replied dryly, "Something like that." Without losing a second, she fired. A bullet whizzed past the young man's head by centimeters. Gwangik froze, his eyes wide with surprise. Looking at the large projectile lodged in the wall, the trainer explained, "This is a modified weapon firing specialized gas-powered bullets." Firing once more for demonstration, the girl said sternly, "Dodge." Understanding the essence of the training, Gwangik smiled and excitement flashed in his eyes. The young man instantly darted forward, dodging shots that came dangerously close to him. Without stopping firing and consuming ammunition one after another, the girl instructed, "Firearms are dangerous. Any hit will cause serious damage. Move while I aim." Dodging like a whirlwind, Gwangik skillfully avoided bullets as his instructor shouted commands, "Seek cover. And if there isn't any, run so fast that I can't aim. Don't move in a straight line, only zigzag. Don't let your opponent predict your next step. If you get caught in the crossfire, tense your muscles and change direction sharply. Use inertia to propel your body." At one point, Gwangik was distracted for just a moment and felt a bullet graze his shoulder. He immediately stumbled and froze. Reloading her magazine and noticing the student's mistake, the girl snapped, "Don't expose yourself. One hit will leave you helpless. If you can't avoid it, expose areas where a wound won't be critical." Again breaking into a run, under the whistling of passing bullets, the young man suddenly realized, preventing loss of mobility? It's exactly like the Immortals. Correlating his knowledge and skills, he came to the conclusion that training on both sides showed that the combat styles of Immortals and Shapeshifters are perfectly adapted to their innate abilities. Analyzing the experience of recent days, the young man reflected. Neither side taught him the art of fighting as such, rather how to survive any situation he might find himself in. Building a plan in his head, he calculated, Immortals should fear cold weapons like knives that can inflict damage in close combat. As for firearms, a shotgun is much more dangerous to them than a rifle. Replaying the technique of strikes in his memory, Gwangik continued, on the other hand, Shapeshifters welcome an opponent with a knife. They just need to dodge and strike back. Their reflexes and strength allow them to react instantly. Recalling firearms, he finally concluded, shotguns are ineffective against them. Its range is limited, and getting closer means game over. Shapeshifters can simply stay out of reach, remaining untouchable. They lack regeneration, so every movement is calculated to avoid even a scratch. Having completed the exercise, the girl walked across the floor littered with casings and, closing her eyes, calmly said, "Okay, that's all for today." Gwangik, looking at the scattering of bullets under his feet, wondered puzzledly, "And how are we going to clean all this up?" Stretching a wire across the entire hall, she commanded, "Stand up and run along it." The young man, barely having time to recover, obediently responded, "Okay." Raising a barbell and pausing at the edge of the wire, he noted to himself, at least such physical training is better than senseless torture of his own body. Gwangik cautiously stepped onto the thin strand of wire. As soon as he took just one step, he felt the presence of a huge monster behind him. At that moment, the young man was gripped by chilling horror. Without losing a second, he activated all his skills and rushed forward, not daring to look back. Losing his balance, the young man fell off the wire and crashed onto the mats with a dull thud. Gwangik immediately jumped up and frantically looked around, trying to find the monster. To his surprise, he saw only his instructor descending towards him. Looking at him with complete incomprehension and wide-open eyes, the girl blurted out, "You..." Noticing the frozen mask of horror on his face, she asked, "Did you feel it?" Looking at the stunned student who was just beginning to get up from the mats, she explained, "This is called bloodlust. I see you were able to sense it." Gwangik mumbled uncertainly in response, "Please don't do that again. I thought my heart would jump out of my chest. It was terrible." Still radiating the aura of a wild beast, the girl calmly added, "That's normal. When you get used to it and can manifest something similar yourself, it will become much easier." Gwangik saw in his instructor not a fragile girl but a terrifying monster again and instantly turned pale when she threw, "Good, continue training." Remembering those days and how the aura of the beast haunted him everywhere, Gwangik thought, this is how my personal hell began in shapeshifter training. But strangely enough, after just 2 days, he stopped falling off the wire. He found a way to resist his teacher's bloodlust. However, remembering the instructor's severity, the young man only sighed heavily. Damn it, she doesn't even think about easing up. Continuing to train until he was drenched in sweat, he realized, thanks to the sharpened senses of an immortal, he was able to perceive the bloodlust with all 5 senses, and then used a 6th sense to cope with it. With renewed determination in his eyes, the young man raised the barbell and stepping forward decided to himself, I need to tense my abdominal muscles and maintain concentration, then I can handle it. Observing her protege's success from the side, the girl crossed her arms over her chest and smirked. Ha, he's actually doing it. The bloody blade flashed again in the teacher stick's hand, and Gwangik admitted, immortal training still resembles hellish torture. Looking at the blood-stained axe dripping with scarlet liquid, he added, in addition to organ regeneration, when an arrow fired by the instructor pierced his shoulder in a flash, the young man continued, I had to deal with axes, spears, arrows. Looking at a bear trap that someone clearly already fell into, he finished his thought, and even traps. You have to be extremely careful with them. Gwangik watched the trainer twirling a finger at his temple and heard her instructions. If you step on this one, the pain will become unbearable, and when it doesn't stop, thinking becomes damn difficult. The young man clarified, so, the most dangerous thing is that which causes prolonged pain, not instant pain? While Gwangik sat crouching, recovering from his wounds, the immortal instructed, usually we fight by simply taking hits. Therefore, you need to get used to the pain. It's the main enemy of logic. Recalling dodging the barrage of bullets from his shapeshifter mentor, Gwangik-yu pondered. Later, I even had to ingest poison. Werewolf training was no less harsh. I wore weighted belts and vests. Remembering endless hours in heavy gear, he continued, and added weight by securing sandbags to my wrists and ankles. One memory followed another. Here he is, bench pressing a massive dumbbell. I never stopped learning to dodge bullets and walk the tightrope, while spending all my free time exhausting my body with exercises. Of course, there were changes too. Returning to reality, Gwangik observed parents cooing in the hallway. Right in the middle of training, father left on a 10-day business trip, he noted awkwardly. Mother, unwilling to let her husband out of her embrace, murmured, "What if I miss you while you're gone?" The man gently assured her, "It's all right. We will see each other every day." His son merely snorted to himself, as if he's leaving for years. Recalling one of the stick fighter teacher's lessons, Gwangjik once again immersed himself in the past, feeling the weight of the wooden blade in his hands. Besides turning my body into a sieve, the mentor taught me weapon proficiency and martial arts, he said. Seeing the student's success, the trainer calmly remarked at the time, "You will quickly master any weapon." Gwangjik whispered, as if speaking to himself, "That's how it was." To test his skills in practice, the teacher took an identical blade and challenged him to a duel. Recalling that fight, the young man reasoned, "It doesn't mean it was easy for me. Perhaps thanks to the body and reflexes of a shapeshifter, I picked things up on the fly." He remembered when his shapeshifter mentor first handed him a training model, explaining, "Even though this is a mock-up, it's no different from the real thing." Gwangjik noted to himself, "On the other hand, the guidance teacher trained me in firearms." Observing how he held the mock-up, the woman calmly said, "Martial arts are also useful, but you can master them yourself. Just watch a couple of video tutorials on the subject. But shooting is delicate. It requires perfect work of all senses." The young man remembered. That's exactly what she kept telling me. When he almost immediately began to confidently hit targets, while his mentor watched with admiration, Gwangjik continued to ponder. "But I have mixed blood in me, and I possess the heightened senses of immortals, so that came easily too." As night slowly descended on the city, and the moon shone brightly in the center of the dark, starry sky, the young man emerged from his memories and said, 2 months have passed." Entering the hall where his parents were already waiting for him, Gwangjik found a familiar scene. While his mother was engrossed in watching a movie, his father glanced at his son and asked, "Son, were you at the gym?" To which he calmly replied, "Yes," and thought to himself, "After a week-long break from training, my hands are itching. Does my body want pain? I hope not." With approval in his eyes, his father slightly turned his head towards Gwangjik and said, "You're very strong, despite being my son." His mother, turning her gaze to the young man, added, "That's good." Again starting to coo at each other, the man remarked to his wife, "He takes after you." To which she retorted, "That's because he is as smart as you are." Gwangjik, not wanting to interrupt this moment, smiled awkwardly, thinking, their relationship has always flourished. Why don't they give me a younger brother or sister? Going into the bathroom and tossing a pile of dirty clothes into the basket, Gwangjik approached the mirror, carefully studying his reflection. Moving closer, the young man firmly gripped the edge of the sink. Looking intently at his reflection, he thought with seriousness, "Why don't I have a girlfriend? My standards aren't that high. Why would they be sky high? I don't even look for someone as stunning and sexy as my mother. Just someone cute and mature but also alluring. It would be nice if she could cook, maybe share my hobbies, and ideally she looks good in jeans, even better, if she is smart and knows exactly what she wants from life." Unexpectedly, his mother, who remained in the living room, received a phone call. The woman immediately paid attention to it. Smoothly rising from the sofa, she looked at her husband and said, "I'll just pop over to Hyemin's mother for a bit." The man clarified, "So late?" Maintaining composure, the woman explained, "Her child is a high school graduate. She must be stressed out," to which he replied, "Yes, it really is a difficult time." When his wife left the house, her husband continued to watch her with a fixed gaze for some time, until his own phone unexpectedly rang. Leaving the bathroom and wiping his wet head with a towel, Gwangjik looked around and called out, "Mom, I can't find the hairdryer. However, immediately noticing the empty living room, the young man muttered, nobody's here. Sitting down on the sofa, Gwangik dropped the towel around his neck and decided to check his phone. Browsing through notifications, he saw a message from his mother with the location and time of the upcoming exam. The young man replied in response and said aloud, "Exam tomorrow? It hasn't been long since I last took something serious, but my feelings are strange now." Recalling a recent conversation with friends who looked at him with obvious incomprehension, Gwangik thought, "They were so surprised that I'm not going to university after taking the CSAT. I don't consider it shameful that my good grades will go to waste. I never planned to go to college." Sinking deeper into memories of the day when a huge black hole swallowed the city, the young man exhaled, "My path was predetermined 9 years ago, on the day the great anomaly called the Hughes Gate opened." Again resurrecting in his memory how he, as a small child, was crushed by beams and stared with horror at the surrounding chaos, the young man continued, "I lay under the rubble of the collapsed building. But it was enough to see him." Recalling the silhouette of his savior bravely fighting hordes of monsters, he whispered, "Watching him fight countless invaders, I decided, I want to be like that." Returning from the depths of memories to reality, Gwangik dreamily looked up. Mom would be upset if she knew about this. On the day of my awakening, she asked me to live a normal life. After which he wondered to himself, and where did she go anyway? Night completely enveloped the city, sparkling with lights in the windows of houses. Kang Sul-hee stood calmly near a 24-hour convenience store when someone called her name. The trainer who had been tirelessly training Gwangik all these days approached Sul-ye and asked, "Under what pretext did you leave home?" Looking at her old acquaintance, the woman simply smiled and replied, "I said I needed to meet the mother of a student from a neighboring district." Sitting down at the nearest free table, the guest inquired, "Aren't you curious?" Looking towards the city, Sul-ye clarified, "About what exactly?" To which her companion, taking a sip from a can, explained, "Your son, you haven't asked how his progress is going." Taking a coffee can and gazing thoughtfully into the distance, the woman admitted, "Well, I just want him to be okay. As much as possible for a half-breed. Mixed blood of a human and shapeshifter usually gives only half the abilities of a purebred relative." Looking into the void, as if her thoughts were already far away, Sul-ye added, "So I didn't ask, just because I was too worried." In a completely different place, a man talking on the phone heard an astonished voice in the receiver. "Huh? What? Are you serious?" Standing on the roof of a high-rise building under the open night sky, the blue-haired man hissed, "Do you want me to throw you into the Pacific Ocean after removing your arms and legs?" To which the voice on the other end replied, "You really didn't know? I thought you hadn't contacted me because you already knew everything." Starting to worry, the man slightly frowned and asked, "What are you talking about?" The interlocutor briefly said, "He is an irregular." At the supermarket, Sul-ye continued to share with her friend, "He doesn't have to be outstanding or the best. I just want him to be able to stand up for himself, against those same groups of mad scientists or something like that." Picking up on the topic, the shapeshifter girl slammed a coffee can onto the table and said tensely, "Groups of mad scientists. There was one, recently. Bastards were trying to combine different species to create something superior in power to purebloods. An irregular." The woman, remembering the news and that monster they had bred, nodded. "Yes, and they succeeded. As a result, they created grotesque monsters possessing the strength of both parents." Returning from the room to the bench outside while her friend finished her coffee, Sul-hye continued, "The conclusion from their experiments was only one. Whether you are an immortal, shapeshifter, or superhuman, if you have offspring with an ordinary human, you simply weaken the blood of your species." The shapeshifter girl, listening to her friend's gloomy reasoning, just closed her eyes contentedly and crumpled the empty can, smirking. "You're lucky." To which Seo-yi briefly said, "Why?" Looking at the woman, she solemnly announced, "You hit the jackpot with your son." Sully asked incredulously, "An irregular?" On the other side of town, a man nervously clenched his phone and, learning about the non-standardness of his son, anxiously clarified, "Is he weaker than a quarter of his strength?" And thought to himself, "I hoped he would reach at least half, because my lineage is so strong." The immortal trainer hurried to reassure the interlocutor. "No, on the contrary, he is incredibly gifted, a genius with talents I have never seen before." The man, not believing his ears, exhaled. "Really?" Meanwhile, near the store, the girl continued to explain to Sulhi. His lineage isn't just good, it's excellent. But moreover, she paused, intriguing her friend. That one couldn't stand it. What, moreover? The companion added. He has a great cauldron brewing inside him. Sulhi, slightly annoyed, snapped at her. Don't use such expressions. But she just waved it off. He's very smart, and also incredibly talented, completely shocking Sulhi, the shapeshifter girl concluded. He even managed to awaken a wild thirst for blood within himself. While both parents listened to those who trained their son, each of them heard their part of the truth. The man on the roof warned his old acquaintance, If you're lying just to make me feel good, I'll bury you alive for 2 weeks. At the same time, the woman stated to her friend, I will be seriously angry if this is just a joke. Without being frightened by the threats, both trainers said in unison, I am telling the truth. After which the immortal added, Your son is incredibly talented. And the girl confirmed, Your son is a true genius. Hearing praise for their son, the parents fell silent for a moment, trying to comprehend what they had heard. Realizing the meaning of what their acquaintances had said, the couple beamed with proud smiles and said in unison, As expected of my son. Rising from the bed, Gwangik, without even opening his eyes, lazily scratched his stomach and mumbled sleepily, Good morning, Mom. Rubbing his eyes and approaching his mother, he asked, Where is Dad? The woman, busy in the kitchen, calmly replied, He went on business. Come on, wash your face quickly and sit down at the table. Seeing the abundance of freshly prepared dishes on the table, the boy exclaimed in amazement, Wow! What's the occasion for such a feast? Looking at her son, Sulhi calmly explained, What do you mean, in honor of what? Today is an important day. Ah, yes, Gwangik replied, adding to himself, That's right, today is the civil service exam. While Gwangik's mother incessantly chattered about the benefits of glucose for the brain, saying it was sweet, dissolved well in water, and provided energy, so one should eat heartily but not overeat to avoid drowsiness, the young man simply said curtly, Understood. Recalling his grueling training sessions, he gloomily thought, I didn't train for cleverness, but for survival. Imagining the wall splattered with crimson before his eyes, he reasoned to himself, in reality, this will be a special employment exam where much fresh blood will be shed. Having finished everything to the last crumb, Gwangik pushed away the empty plates and thanked them, saying, Thank you, it was very delicious. Already sitting on the doorstep and putting on his shoes, he heard his mother's question, Ready? Yes, so much so that I even memorized everything in my sleep, Gwangik assured calmly. But in his thoughts flashed, I was beaten on the ankles there, and they almost pierced my organs. Imagining the worst possible outcome, her mother frowned slightly and, looking at the floor, said, If you don't pass, your father will be disappointed. Mom, called Gwangik. Assessing his mother's condition, the young man rose and calmly thought, She is troubled. She doesn't like the idea of my service, but she also doesn't want me to fail. She tries to support me, but at the same time worries about me as a werewolf. Wishing to cheer her up, Gwangik smiled confidently. Don't worry, Mom. And he added to himself, After all, I am immortal. Dismissing bad thoughts, Sulhi, looking at her confident son, warned, Is that how it will be? Then remember this. If you fail, we'll meet in the ring. Gwangik, remembering his mother's fury in boxing gloves, mumbled, Well, that's too much, and stopped short, thinking, I remembered something I would have preferred to forget forever. Crossing her arms over her chest, the woman added as a parting shot, If you don't want to get scolded, just pass this exam. Yes, definitely, Gwangik replied, heading towards the exit. Entering the elevator and pressing the button for the first floor, the young man leaned against the metal wall and closed his eyes. Music really is the best remedy for nerves, he decided. Freezing for a moment, Gwangik Yu suddenly realized, Wait a minute, I received heightened senses from the immortal. Clearing his throat, he began to softly sing, Why do I say one thing and then regret it? Now I will finally confess. You were my love from the very beginning. Not noticing how the doors had opened, he was completely immersed in the song. That's how much I love you, he sang, unaware that a young woman with blonde hair and brown eyes was watching him. Having spotted a witness, the young man awkwardly swallowed and turned around. The young woman put down her phone and sighed. Appa, don't even think about singing when you propose. A handsome man doesn't necessarily need to be a singer too. Turning away and stopping singing, Gwangik Yu grumbled, Hyemin Kang, what business is it of yours? The girl entered the elevator and, standing next to him, retorted, "Aren't you going to confess your love to me?" "Nope." The boy cut her off. "Why?" she asked casually. "I've told you 100 times what my ideal is," Gwangik reminded her. Hearing this, Kang Hye-min took his arm and casually said, "Oh, come on." Radiating self-confidence, the girl added with a smile, "It's hard to find beauties with such excellent figures and brains." Descending to the first floor, Gwangik ignored her hints and freed his hand, causing his companion to almost stumble. "You just don't talk like that outside," he said dryly. "Don't you know what kind of world we live in? Do you want to provide me with a gift in the form of steel bracelets? And regarding brains, I disagree, by the way. It seems you forgot to mention your greed." Having lost all pride, Hyemin Kang rushed after him. "Hey, wait! Don't follow me!" Gwangik Yu threw over his shoulder without turning around or slowing down. Continuing to follow him along the morning streets, the girl asked, "Appa, where are you going?" "To take the civil service exam," replied the young man calmly. Surprised, the girl stopped. "To Edville? By the way, these guys know how to do advertising," he remarked. "They're practically brainwashing people." Having reached the bus stop while waiting for the bus, Gwangik dryly said to Hyemin, "In short, I'm busy. Go to school." "Appa, I'm a senior," she protested. "I'll be entering university next year." "Congratulations," he replied. "Try not to waste your life on drinking when you get your ID card." "Hey, you're only a year older than me," the girl exclaimed indignantly. Trying to provoke her, the boy asked, "So what, do you feel the difference?" The girl, attempting once again to boast and sting him back, declared, "You don't understand. Right now I'm at an all-girls school, but I will choose a co-ed university, and then a whole pack of wolves might attack such a beauty like me." Gwangik, ignoring her, dryly retorted, "First focus on your studies. Your mother is already worried about you." As Gwangik boarded the bus, the girl wouldn't let up. "So, how about we start dating, and you can help me with my studies too? It's great when your boyfriend is smart." The boy, without even turning around, waved his hand at her. "Who is whose boyfriend here? Don't scare away my future wife. Shoo, go on, get out of here." In response to his words, the girl saw him off with her tongue sticking out in a very unambiguous gesture towards his back. Entering the salon and putting on headphones, the young man thought, "Our high-kick lady hasn't changed at all." He remembered how Hyemin Kang could furiously deliver a kick to someone's groin. King Hyemin's signature move. If you anger her, brace for a blow between the legs. The bus started moving, driving along the deserted morning streets. Having reached the location, the young man saw an impressive glass building. Entering inside, he immediately took out his phone and checking the time noted to himself, 7:50, I'm a little early. The exam isn't until 9. So, where should I go now? Approaching the registration desk and seeing 2 young female employees, Gwangik greeted them. "Hello." They returned his greeting and asked, "Good morning. What brings you here?" "As far as I know, there is a special employment exam being held here today," explained the young man. A man passing by called out to him, "Are you here for the exam?" "Yes," Gwangik confirmed, turning around. Glaring fiercely at him and furrowing his brow, the stranger sternly demanded, "May I see your application?" "What are you looking at me for?" thought the young man. Watching the descending elevator, the young man introduced himself. "My name is Gwangik Yu." "Verified," the man said dryly. "Go up to the 9th floor." Having arrived on the correct floor, Gwangik Yu stepped out of the elevator and looked around. "Is this really the place?" Almost immediately, a girl with pink hair called out to him, "Are you here for the exam?" Receiving an affirmative response, she added, "Please show me your application." Having checked all the necessary documents, the girl nodded with satisfaction and said, Well, everything is correct." Opening the door to the corridor, she turned to Gwangik and said, "Go straight ahead until you reach the door at the very end of the hallway. You need to go there." "Thank you," he replied curtly, but thought to himself, "How tedious all this is. Could it be because the exam is designed for immortals?" Leaving her behind, the boy walked along the long corridor. Having located the correct door, Gwangik quietly confirmed, "This one?" He quickly read the inscription on the sign, "Exam venue for special employment." Freezing before the entrance and not daring to enter, the young man involuntarily wondered, "I wonder if there's good soundproofing inside. There will definitely be a lot of noise and crimson stains, and they just had to set this up in the very center of Uedo. Old Force. Could this really be what the power of a world government looks like?" Gathering his spirits, the young man sighed heavily. Whew, all right. Feeling the mounting tension, he added to himself, I need to focus. I wouldn't be surprised if knives flew at me immediately after opening the door. Perhaps the ability to dodge them is the first condition for admission. Carefully opening the door a crack, Gwangik peered inside with a heavy look, expecting the worst. Whatever is happening there, I'm sure, I'm in for the same torment as in training. However, fully opening the door, he saw only a spacious office with ordinary desks and office chairs. Or is that not so? He breathed out in surprise. The man in a strict suit sitting inside called out to him, You are the first. Gwangik, still not daring to cross the threshold, noted with astonishment, Wait a minute, this uncle... Looking at the tall stranger whose bald head shone brightly in the sun, the boy thought in amazement, completely without hair? The man, meanwhile, didn't even glance at the guest and continued typing on his computer, dryly ordering, Come in and submit your application. Gwangik, however, sank deeper into his thoughts. They've long since invented a remedy for baldness from materials obtained from a white hole. Yes, it has side effects, but there are also cheaper options. Unable to tear his gaze away from the examiner's shining head, he concluded, So, baldness is fashionable now? Not noticing the young man's strange reaction, the man finally looked up from the monitor. Young man, he called out. Gwangik Yu, regaining his senses, handed over the documents and said, Here you are. An application and identification. Feeling awkward, he wondered again, Why do they all think I'm some kind of clown? Is it not obvious from my handsome face? Accepting the papers, the man pointed to one of the tables at the back of the room. Your number is 48. Take a seat. It's not quite how I imagined it, Gwangik mused. I didn't have any tables or chairs during training. Walking towards his place, he closed his eyes and reasoned, Well, okay. Who knows what will happen when they start? Maybe someone really will attack me with a knife. Sitting down at the table and clasping his hands in front of his face, the young man focused as much as possible. That's right. You can't relax for even a second. Sharpening his perception to the limit, Gwangik decided, I must be prepared for any eventuality. Some time passed, but nothing changed in the room. Only other students entered one by one and silently took their seats. Those who arrived immediately buried their noses in books and notebooks, frantically repeating notes and preparing for the start. Feeling the absurdity of the situation, the young man even paled slightly, breaking out in a cold sweat from embarrassment. At that moment, the man stood up and, extending his hand with a pen, asked, Is there anyone who didn't bring a pen for the exam? After a minute's pause, only Gwangik raised his hand among all those present. The examiner looked at him with such bewilderment as if he wanted to ask, Young man, who are you? Gwangik responded with an equally puzzled look as if saying, Good question. At that moment, he finally realized that he had gotten into a strange situation, but there was no one to complain to. Recalling everything that had happened since the day he began preparing, starting with that memorable conversation with his father, the young man thought, it all started in complete confusion, and then it turned into unbearably grueling training. Before his eyes flashed all the trials he had gone through, the path of knives, suffocating holds, and severe injuries from blades. He continued to think, since I was destined for this fate, I decided to give it my all, sincerely wanting to pass this exam. Returning from his memories to reality, Gwangik Yu, still in shock, whispered to himself, but here everything went completely off plan. Meanwhile, the man officially announced, We begin in 10 minutes. Handing a writing instrument to Gwangik, the bald man briefly said, Here you go. Twirling the pen in his hands and carefully examining it, the young man noted, Looks like an ordinary marker. It seems they really will be evaluating us based on written work. Looking around and observing the others, he tried to assess the situation. It looks just like a regular graduation. What are they memorizing so diligently? If I ask to see, they'll probably think I'm an idiot. Taking a closer look at those around him, he noticed that all the students looked quite attractive. By the way, everyone here has rather unusual features. Looking at one of the young men with masculine and refined features, Gwangik added, Some could go straight into idol groups. Slightly rising to get a better view of a neighbor nearby, he thought, True, one of them stands out more than others. Examining the young man with blonde hair and light eyes, Gwangik admired, This guy? Damn, his hands are just perfect. He'd be great for advertising. The green-eyed youth, feeling the intense gaze on him, looked away from his book and glanced at Gwangik. Without lingering for a second, the handsome man demonstratively turned away, which raised even more questions in Gwangik. Feeling awkward, the young man averted his eyes and thought, I don't understand. I hope he didn't imagine anything extra. At that moment, two unknown people entered the room, carrying blackboards with them. One by one, they began to install these shields between the students' tables on all four sides. Gwangik Yu, watching the process, only breathed in amazement. What? Supporting his head with his fist, he thoughtfully watched what was happening. They decided to put up screens for hypersensitive immortals? That's why there was so much space between the tables. Meanwhile, the examiner loudly announced, now everyone will receive their exam sheets. While Gwanik was lost in thought, he heard a voice from behind the screen. I'm not late, am I? As Gwangik received test blanks that were distributed among the screens, he heard from the other end of the hall, No, your number is 50. Go over there. The late student replied, Thank you, I accidentally overslept. Eavesdropping on this conversation, Gwangik smirked to himself. If it were any other exam, I wouldn't be in such a hurry either. Looking at the questions on the blank, the young man self-confidently muttered, Well, an exam for immortals is probably easy. However, after reading the tasks more carefully, he immediately corrected himself. No, take that back. Grabbing his head and sighing heavily, Gwangik stared at the sheet, clutching the pen in his hand. Ha! What's going on? Guys, can we just skip this? Flashed through his mind. Let's run with the knives instead. I'll show you some acrobatic tricks that will blow your mind. Opening his eyes and reading the first question about what actions to take in case of a gunshot wound, the young man studied the answer options and exhaled puzzledly. What? Thinking for a moment and scratching the back of his head, Gwangik began to mark the correct option. Isn't someone just complaining about how difficult this is? He reasoned. Obviously the answer is 4. Looking at the task more closely, as if looking for a trick, the young man began to analyze. If you don't belong to a special race, the second and third answers may be more important, but since the wound is the size of a small coin, it can't be considered serious. Assuming it was a projectile weapon, it's best to start by stopping the bleeding. Memories flashed of his immortal trainer's instructions. First stop the bleeding, otherwise shock will set in. Apply hemostasis and then find cover. The teacher's words echoed in Gwangik's head. That's exactly what he drilled into me, noted the young man. Although after a couple of runs with knives, I figured it out myself. If you stop the bleeding in time, a minor wound won't threaten an immortal's life. Having finished with the first question, Gwangik moved on to the next, where he was asked what percentage of blood needs to be lost for shock to set in. The young man continued to think, let's go. What's wrong with these questions? Remembering his bitter experience when the trainer chased him with a blade, leaving deep cuts on his body, the young man estimated, I remember the teacher scolding me that I never went into shock. He said that immortals are fundamentally similar to humans. In that case, the correct answer is 3. Starting the next task more confidently, Gwangik propped his head with his fist and read, Next question. You can't dodge a knife attack. What will you do? The answer came instantly. I'll put my arm up, of course. I've been told about the importance of maintaining mobility more than enough. Continuing to fill out the blanks, Gwangik wondered, Okay, here we have the first option. I suddenly remembered a movie I watched a long time ago. Noticing questions about poisons, Gwangik confidently smirked. Oh, about poisons? Well, I'm an expert at that. While he marked the answers, thoughts continued to swirl in his head. In that film, it told the story of a guy from the slums who participated in a quiz with a huge prize. He guessed the answers simply by relying on his life experience. Time flowed smoothly in the room. Students were busy. Some nervously gnawed on their pens, others focused intently on reading the lines. Gwangik didn't take his eyes off his thoughts. This exam tests what candidates have gone through with an immortal body and how much they have realized. My level of knowledge, for example, is like walking in circles of hell. Calmly writing answers one by one and replaying exhausting training sessions in his head, Gwangik concluded, the teacher's advice and the knowledge gained on my own skin, all this flawlessly tells me the correct solutions. Having finished the work, the young man slammed the pen onto the table. Glancing at the completed blank, Gwangik realized once again, so, my training was actually learning. While reviewing the papers, Gwangik noticed that there was another item on the back of one of the sheets. Reading it, he noted, another question on the back. This one requires a detailed answer. Lazily running his eyes over the lines, Gwangik propped his head with his hand and smirked. How can you kill an immortal? The answer is obvious. Having dealt with all the tasks, the young man slightly stuck his head out from behind the screen, looking around. Done. And how much time has passed? He estimated. The balding man, noticing Gwangik, thought puzzledly, there's still a whole hour left. Did he give up? However, he announced something completely different aloud. Those who have finished can leave the auditorium. Leave your exam sheets on your desks. Stepping out of the office, Gwangik Yu looked around with relief. Spotting a familiar pink-haired girl, he recognized her. The nun with the bob cut I saw at the entrance. When she called out to him, she asked, "Did you read what was written on the first page of the question sheets?" To which Gwangik briefly confirmed, "Yes." Hearing a positive response, the nun handed Gwangik a tablet and requested, "Then please leave your consent." The young man leaned slightly forward and, pressing the screen, quickly scanned the text. "According to the Personal Information Protection Law, blah, blah, blah. Mess up, and you'll get it from Old Force. Yikes, scary, agreed." Once the formalities were over, the girl clarified, "If I understand correctly, are you a half-blood?" Gwangik replied aloud, "Yes," though he added to himself, "more like a werewolf, an immortal collaboration." Without waiting for a response, the pink-haired girl happily nodded. "I'll be hoping for your success." Slightly embarrassed, Gwangik simply mumbled, "Thank you." But inwardly, he noted, did they really give me the green light? Though she's not exactly my type. Late night fell, enveloping the city and its skyscrapers in thick twilight. Sitting in his office, a balding man checked the test papers. Studying another sheet, he grabbed his head in confusion. While reviewing one of the last questions, how can an immortal be killed? The examiner read Gwangik's answer. Strangulation, freezing, burning, dismemberment. The man muttered to himself in bewilderment. "Look at this." Imagining the scenarios listed, the man reasoned, all of this is fatally dangerous for an immortal, and loss of consciousness due to lack of oxygen and freezing with liquid nitrogen. He continued to mentally consider the options, and burning in fire, as total burns make normal bodily function impossible, and dismemberment, as the probability of regeneration in such a case is highly questionable. Looking at Gwangik's answers, the examiner concluded, you can endlessly describe ways to eliminate an immortal. In other words, there isn't one single correct answer to this question. Most of us have dulled our sense of danger. Therefore, you need to consider any lethal weapon in any situation. Reading the last line of the test again, the man realized, how many ways do you know to harm an immortal? The point of the question was exactly that. Recalling the incredible power of the immortals and their blue glow enveloping their bodies during moments of strength, he developed his thought. Our body is capable of regeneration, but death is still real. Knowing this, one can significantly reduce the risk of death, even without memorizing all the ways to eliminate them. Studying Gwangik's personal application, the man noted to himself, I heard he was born from a human and an immortal. His physical data might be lacking, but his brain is working. Remembering the young man's face, which didn't reveal him as an immortal at all, the man concluded, the test is checked. Now for assessing first impressions. Looks like an ordinary guy. Came earlier than everyone else and stared at one spot for a whole hour. Left first, too. Didn't even bring a pen to the exam. Half a month later, Gwangik's phone vibrated, notifying him of an incoming message. Picking up the phone, the young man told his mother, Mom, your son passed the exam successfully. To which the woman, without being distracted from her work, responded, Oh, excellent. Showing the screen of his phone, Gwangik added, However, I didn't just pass it. Sulhye Kang, turning around, asked in surprise, In what sense? Looking closely at the text message, the woman read, Congratulations, you took first place on the written exam for a civil servant. She gasped in shock. First place? Instantly forgetting about cooking, the woman put down her knife and immediately grabbed her phone. Immediately calling her husband, the woman joyfully announced the news. Yunho Yu, we got first place. Yes, yes, of course. Uh-huh. Let's get top-grade beef, she exclaimed excitedly as Gwangik watched her with embarrassment. Waiting for his mother to hang up, Gwangik called out to her and asked, Am I allowed to loosen my belt today? To which the woman sarcastically retorted, Wear pants with an elastic waistband. As deep night fell over the city, a voice came from inside the Yu family's home. I'm home. Hearing his father's voice, Gwangik happily ran towards him. Hi, Dad, to which Yonho Yu replied, Oh, son. Gazing intently at the bags of groceries, the young man breathed out, The meat has arrived, my meat. The man, laughing, countered, Pretend to be happy to see me, too. Gradually, the house filled with the aroma of roasted meat. cool drinks, and a festive family atmosphere. Talking to his son, the man remarked, "I never doubted your abilities." The young man reciprocated, "Naturally, whose son am I?" His mother, smiling slightly, added, "Ours, of course." Recalling one of his teachers, Gwangik confidently said, "The questions turned out to be much easier than I thought." And to himself he added, "But that teacher is awesome." Continuing the family feast, Yonho Yu told his son, "Now that the results are in, there will soon be an interview." "Well, that's it then." However, Gwangik missed his father's words, completely absorbed in the meal. Turning his gaze to his wife, the woman clarified, "Which department will he go to?" The man thoughtfully replied, "I don't know exactly. He'll probably start at a state-owned enterprise under the Ministry of Administrative Security." Hearing this, the young man froze with a piece of meat in his mouth and asked in surprise, "Huh?" Deciding to treat Yunho Yu, the woman held out a piece of beef to him. "Eat up, dear." But he shyly refused. Focusing on his father, Gwangik thought, Mom didn't notice because he acted as usual, but it seemed like he tried to avoid answering. Recalling the building of government agencies, the young man pondered, what did the government in Old Force choose immortals for? And what exactly do immortal civil servants do? Disappointed, Gwangik couldn't chew a bite. There are many questions, but I won't get answers to any of them, he thought. The man, noticing his son's puzzled expression, asked, "What's wrong?" Finishing the meal late at night, the young man requested, "Dad, give me some advice for the interview." To which the man dryly replied, "I don't know anything." Putting on a business suit and fastening his jacket, Gwangik wondered. Soon after the joyful news of first place on the test, events began to move faster. Checking a message on his phone, the young man noted, "A notification has arrived with the date. The interview itself will take place in the same building." As his father saw him off, he only said at the last moment, "I don't know. You need to show your individuality at the interview. Answer clearly and concisely." Gwangik thought, well, I didn't get any useful advice from him anyway. Putting on his shoes as he left the house, the young man prepared himself. There's nothing for it. May the best man win. But at the last moment, his mother called out to him, "Son," with a light smile on her face, she said, "Good luck." Turning around before leaving and adjusting his tie, the young man in a business suit replied, "Thank you, Mom." Entering the elevator and leaning against the wall, the young man glanced at his reflection. Lost in admiration of himself, he began to pose in front of the mirror, smirking contentedly. Not noticing anything around him, the young man continued to strike poses. "In such a flashy outfit, I could go straight into show business." However, at that moment, an old friend appeared behind him. "What are you staring at in the mirror? Admiring yourself?" Turning his head over his shoulder, Gwangik threw back, "We keep running into each other lately. Are you following me?" Dismissing the suspicions, the girl scoffed. "What do you mean I was just passing by?" Gwangik reproachfully replied, "Even though it's the weekend, you'd be better off studying instead of wandering around." As Gwangik walked away, the girl shouted after him, "Once I become your tutor, then you can tell me what to do." But the young man ignored her words, saying, "Busy." Calling out to him at the last moment, the girl said with a light smile, "Appa, that suit looks good on you." Turning his head over his shoulder, the young man chuckled contentedly. "I know." Tall city buildings loomed majestically in the daylight. Entering inside, the youth saw an inscription on the door, "Applicant Waiting Room." Walking further in and surveying the people diligently preparing for their interviews, the young man thought, "Everyone is trying so hard. Maybe I should have read more other people's stories." Looking closely at one of the applicants, the youth slightly raised an eyebrow. "Oh, it's that prince who sat next to me during the test." Noticing the gaze upon him, the stranger looked up at the young man. Seeing Gwangik before him, the prince only paused his gaze on him for a moment before demonstratively turning away. Feeling clear irritation from the dark-haired man's behavior, Gwangik, slightly frowning, thought, "What was that just now? I'll sit further away from you this time." Walking a little further, he settled into one of the chairs, looking around. After some time, an employee entered the room and announced, "Number 48, Yu Gwangik." The young man immediately responded, "Yes, yes." Entering the next office, Gwangik noticed two new people at the threshold. Looking at the man with fiery hair and a stern gaze, the youth thought to himself, "Pale skin and red hair. I bet his call sign is Candle." Turning his gaze to the second person and recognizing the familiar girl with purple bobbed hair, the young man was surprised. And next to him, Nuna from the first floor. "So, she's now on the jury?" Noticing Gwangik, Nuna smiled kindly and said, "We've met before, haven't we?" Sitting down in a chair opposite the examiners, Gwangik heard the first question. What motivated you to apply to our company? Hesitating with an answer, the youth paused. If I admit my father forced me, I'll be kicked out of here. I need to come up with something. A moment later, Gwangik said confidently, I was interested in testing my abilities in such a challenging trial. Looking at the man with red hair, the young man added, and fulfilling my dream. The man clarified, Dream? Gwangik continued, I want to fight for our people and homeland. Frowning, the man asked, In that case, what sacrifices are you willing to make for a comrade in battle? To which the youth replied, It all depends on the situation. Remaining dissatisfied, the examiner reasonably noted, So you have no intention of sacrificing anything? Hearing the provocation, Gwangik immediately parried, That's not true. I will simply find an effective way out of a difficult situation. However, as both judges fell silent after his words, he became nervous. Did that sound too defiant? As the jury began to bombard him with questions in turn, Gwangik noted to himself that a series of standard topics had begun. Soon, Nuna voiced her task. Your mother and your girlfriend are drowning. Who would you save first? Hearing this, he calmly exhaled. I think I can pull both out. I'm a pretty good swimmer. The man with red hair stared intently at the young man and added, You have only one bullet left, but 2 targets. Just as calmly and without hesitation, Gwangik said, I'll shoot one and disarm the other by throwing the pistol at him. Both examiners froze for a moment at such an answer, trying to imagine such a scene. Gwangik thought, although, thinking about it, my answers weren't the most obvious. In general, the interview was over. A couple of days later, Gwangik blissfully lay in bed, flipping through videos and laughing heartily at them. Noticing this, his mother looked reproachfully at her son and grumbled, You've become quite lazy after the interview. Do you have any plans for today? To which the young man retorted, No, actually I do. As he sat up in bed, Soulier reminded him, Remember what awaits you if you fail? To which the youth, turning pale from unpleasant memories, mumbled, A boxing sparring match with you. Imagining how his mother could deal with him in the ring, he added to himself, And in the final round, a truly harsh reckoning. Entering the room, she asked, With whom do you have plans? To which Gwangik explained, With myself, I decided to dedicate this day to JSSV. Confused, the woman was surprised. JSSV. To which Gwangik joyfully deciphered, Eat, sleep, relieve oneself, and have fun. A moment later, his mother, hearing this, threatened him with a fist. The young man immediately panicked and babbled, I suddenly felt like doing something. Where should we go? Maybe to the mountains. Admiring the view from the window, Sulhye called her son. Come out, let's talk. To which he sighed resignedly. Understood. After that, the woman warned, You need to be careful there. Sitting at the table opposite the young man, she began to explain, Werewolf instincts are dangerous. If they take over, trouble can happen. To which the youth, scratching the back of his head, clarified, What kind of trouble? Turning sideways, his mother cut him off. Most often, beatings. What else? And the woman exhaled. Attacks on people. Recalling a terrible story about a lone wolf howling at the bloody moon, Sulhi began, Do you know why the legend of a werewolf crying in the full moon appeared? Growing somber, the woman continued her story. One of them couldn't control his nature and began to howl under the moon, and it just happened to be a full moon. Concluding the story and drawing a moral, she summarized, If you can't restrain your desires, go outside and just shout. It will feel better. Hearing this advice, Gwangik noted, But if you believe the news, mages and superhumans cause the most problems. Besides, I've never heard anyone howling late at night. Continuing her explanations, his mother insisted, There is still a way to overcome your impulses. And to his question, What? She declared, Self-control. Remembering how Sulhye constantly took him to the mountains, Gwangik thought, If you think about it, after awakening my abilities, Mom often took me with her. Apparently, this was a kind of training. Aloud, he just said a brief, Aha. Reproachfully wagging her finger at her son, the woman continued, Another way is to relieve tension. You can spend excess energy on exercise. The main problem is stress. Looking at the embarrassed Gwangik, she smiled. That's why I told you. Find yourself a girlfriend. Otherwise you'll grow moss at this rate. Finally crushing his morale, Sulhye added, Although no, that's just half the trouble. You were born with a high probability of doing something stupid. Developing her thought, his mother decided to clarify. Or maybe you like boys? However, she didn't have time to finish when Gwangik quickly and firmly cut her off. No, Resting his head on his hand and sighing heavily, the woman murmured, "A whole month of cohabitation during training? What kind of company is that?" Looking at her calm son, she suggested, "You were probably accepted, so maybe postpone the appointment for now and do what you really want, as your father advised." Gwangik didn't answer, remembering the moment after the interview when he was handed a contract with the words, "Please read the documents carefully. If you have any questions, ask." Starting to study the papers, the youth looked at the training period and wondered, what will they teach there if it takes more than a month? And what is this cohabitation during the internship? Running his eyes over the first few lines, he froze, unable to believe what he was seeing. As he delved deeper into the text, the young man realized the incredible privileges it promised him: full coverage of physical training, generous bonuses, reimbursement for cultural activities, and even daily expenses. Gwangik continued to study the list: compensation for any outside activity, various benefits. And the longer the young man read, the more persistently a thought echoed in his mind. But I wanted to be a soldier. Stunned by the contents of the document, he thought, this is just an insane corporation. It's completely destroying South Korea's entire labor ecosystem. While he was pondering this, Nuna asked, "Do you have any questions?" Looking at the woman, Gwangik clarified, "Can I show these papers to my parents?" The interlocutor responded with a counter-question. "Your father is one of the immortals, isn't he?" The young man confirmed this with a short, "Yes." With a feigned smile, the girl crossed her fingers, closed her eyes, and said, "If you want to see your mother behind bars for the rest of her life, then, of course, tell them." Gwangik merely noted gloomily to himself, "How sweetly she says such terrible things." Emerging from a whirlpool of memories back into reality, the young man finally decided, "That's why I can't trust my mother with anything but such conditions and attitude." He sighed heavily and called out, "Mom." Turning a serious gaze on her, Gwangik solemnly announced, "Your son has decided to try his hand as the head of a state corporation within the Ministry of Public Administration." He sounded confident aloud, but added to himself, "This should be enough to melt even an icy heart." His mother averted her gaze and awkwardly asked, "Is that so?" To which he replied, "I am convinced that young people who hold the future of our country must have such high aspirations." Rising from the table, the woman calmly remarked, "You speak beautifully." Gwangik just shrugged and added, "Isn't this the best gratitude to a wise father and wonderful mother?" Although my mixed blood also played a role, looking at her son with unconcealed pride and tenderness, Sylvia confessed, "I'm glad that you are my son. At least because your pompous phrases hardly annoy me anymore." Scanning Gwangik with an assessing gaze, his mother dreamily stretched out her hand. "If only there was a child like you among the werewolves." With a light smile and confidence in his eyes, the young man interrupted her, assuring, "Everything is perfectly all right." Recalling recent news reports, Gwangik wondered, "Mom, I think my blood is a very successful mix. Werewolves have instincts that are difficult to control, and immortals have incredibly heightened senses." Looking at the fleeting silhouettes of immortals and werewolves from television broadcasts, the young man continued to reason. The instincts of the former sometimes manifest too sharply, and among the latter, there are many overly sensitive individuals. I don't belong to either. Remembering his recent sessions at his laptop, he developed the thought, "I can easily cope with my impulses thanks to the internet. Besides, I'm still young." Imagining himself peacefully falling asleep in his bed, Gwangik added, "As for the heightened sensitivity of immortals, I'm perfectly capable of sleeping anywhere and eating what I'm given." When the morning sky lit up with the first rays heralding a new day, the young man finally calmed down. So there's absolutely nothing to worry about. Reading in his phone a message about the meeting place and boarding the bus, he whispered to himself, "Wherever I go and whatever I do." Several immortals were already sitting on the bus heading to the required stop, lazily looking out the windows. Standing on the side of the road with a suitcase in hand, Gwangik met the transport with a firm conviction, "I am fully confident in my abilities." The scorching sun flooded the sky with bright light. People at the bus stop were suffering from the sweltering heat, sweating profusely. Settling into his seat and looking out the window, Gwangik dreamily exhaled. Summer. Looking around the salon, which had already begun to fill up, the young man thought, "In this huge bus provided by the company, you can comfortably enjoy air conditioning, escaping from the scorching sun." Scanning other applicants, the young man noted, "There are only immortals around, although the lounge is only half full. Well, it's time to go on an orientation for interns. Walking down the aisle and studying the faces of the guys and girls, Gwangik concluded, as soon as I sat on the bus and looked around, I immediately understood who here is purebred and who is a half-breed. Noticing differences in auras, the young man added to himself, it's easier to identify purebloods. They have a flashy appearance, and the atmosphere around them is completely different. Looking at the bluish glow of one of the immortals, he reasoned, I feel this thanks to my heightened senses and extraordinary intuition. Glancing at his neighbor on the side, the young man smirked. I guarantee I'm not mistaken. Looking closer at his neighbor, he recognized a young brunette of rare beauty and thought, this prince is also a pureblood. And damn it, he's next to me again. There were simply no other free seats. Distracted for a moment, he overheard snippets of conversation behind him. Half-breed? And you? From my father's side. The guys exchanged words. Seeing how quickly passengers found common ground, Gwangik resentfully noted, some people are already getting acquainted. Immersing himself in memories, he revived a past walk when his father instructed him on the playground. Try to make more friends, and never judge people by their appearance. The images of the past became clearer and clearer, and Gwangik almost heard his parents' voice. Sometimes it happens that the one who doesn't seem appealing at first glance turns out to be a worthy person, and vice versa. Little Gwangik, sitting on the swings, obediently nodded. Okay, I understand. Patting his son on the head, his father smiled. How you've grown. To which the young Gwangik proudly retorted, I'm already taller than you. Leaning against the bar, the man smirked. It's not about height, silly. By the way, how's your sleep? He asked. Gwangik grumbled in response. Okay. His father nodded approvingly. That's good. I had a hard time when I was your age. Lazily swinging, Gwangik curiously asked, what happened? The man sighed heavily. Insomnia tormented me. Otherwise everything was fine, but the sounds from the neighboring house at night didn't let me close my eyes. Interested in the story, the young man clarified, and how did you cope with it? You can't just not sleep forever. He added, thinking to himself, werewolves suppress instincts through self-control, but how do immortals deal with their hypersensitivity? After some thought, his father confessed, I tried everything. Earplugs, sleeping masks, even heavy microfiber blankets. Nothing helped. In the end, I just bought a 4-story house, furnished a room in the very center, and surrounded it with soundproof walls. Hearing these words, Gwangik froze in shock and sarcastically remarked, effective solution. What about the poor? Laughing at his son's reaction, the man added, when you continue to fight insomnia while leading an active life, over time you learn to control your feelings, and it becomes easier. Well, or you can go train in the mountains for 3 years, of course. Hearing this, Gwangik said nothing, just thought deeply. It turns out that his father had a hard time mastering control over feelings, while for him himself it was natural, like breathing. Recalling his werewolf identity, the young man realized his fellow tribesmen have access to the finest regulation of all muscles in the body. Control of emotions is largely similar to how you, for example, sharpen your ears or can tense a certain part of your back. Opening his eyes again and turning his gaze to his father, Gwangik mentally said, thank you, Mom. At that moment, his father continued, I think all the guys will be very sensitive. Think about how to act in such cases. On their way home, they began to argue. Give me a strategy, asked his son. It's not interesting if you know everything in advance, replied the man. No, it's very interesting. A little of this and a little of that. Have some conscience. Returning from a whirlpool of memories to reality, Gwangik turned to the brunette next to him. Hello. In response, he only glared at him irritably. Trying to continue the dialogue, the young man waved his hand and clarified. 3rd time already, right? The brunette didn't react in any way, just stared intently at the interlocutor, to which Gwangik added, We've met for the 3rd time, I mean. Suddenly the young prince asked, Do you know me? Gwangik, outraged by such a question, froze for a moment, thinking, what a pest. Trying to jog his neighbor's memory, Gwangik Yu recalled all their past encounters. We actually made eye contact twice, and you blinked exactly that many times. Counting on his fingers, he continued listing, We met during the test, at the interview, and now here. However, the prince turned away coldly, dismissing him with, I'm seeing you for the first time. Shaking with anger, Gwangik muttered to himself, Father, I don't know about a first impression, but it's clear after the first dialogue. His Highness clearly has memory problems, unfortunately. Growing increasingly agitated, he glared at the back of the dark-haired man's head. Shameless face, so much so that I would call it a snout. Turning around, Gwangik decided to distract himself from his neighbor and looked at the girl behind him. Let that prince go to hell. I'll say hello to the girl sitting behind me. Scanning her with his gaze, the young man noted, another blonde, though she doesn't look like a purebred. Turning around completely, he found himself facing a woman with light hair and bright yellow eyes. Nice to meet you, said the young man. Instead of a greeting, the girl simply asked, Are you a half-breed? To which Gwangik reasonably replied, Isn't it obvious just by looking at me? Giving him a dismissive look, the stranger dryly spoke. Immortal through his father's lineage. Emotions are dulled, raised in wealth. Even without knowing where you're being taken, you fell for the conditions and rushed to sign the contract. Am I right? Hearing this, the young man felt offended and thought, That's not true. I actually have cosmic-scale dreams about this company. Stunned by such audacity, Gwangik, barely restraining his anger, forced out, Greenhorn. And then plaintively added to himself, Father, it seems we don't just have a prince here, but also a princess, Her Highness Sherlock Holmes. Turning sideways, the young man asked, And who are you anyway? To which she sarcastically retorted, I see your observational skills are at 0. Crossing her arms and leaning back in her chair, she explained, Immortals are extremely sensitive individuals. The reason everyone sat away from the windows is that even through the curtains, irritating sunlight gets through. Lustily glancing at Gwangik, the girl continued, Even just chatting now is excruciating. I know this well because I'm just as sensitive. Looking around the back rows of the bus, she explained, Only half-breeds are calmly munching on chips and chattering here. Turning her gaze back to the young man, the blonde angrily snapped, So do me a favor and shut up, blind turkey. At such an insult, Gwangik almost turned black with humiliation. I want to punch her, he thought. Forget my parents' instructions. I'd show this Sherlock what for. Crossing his arms over his chest, he closed his eyes and, calming down a bit, reasoned, Although, on the other hand, she is right. If I remember correctly, Father was nicknamed Prickly when he was in a relationship. Immersing himself in thought, the young man added, And that was after he awakened his abilities and got used to them. My fellow bus passengers are doing 100 times worse now. Looking around the half-empty salon where everyone was occupied with their own affairs, he resentfully thought, But no, not at all. That doesn't justify their rude behavior. This is how our bus, heading for orientation, turned into a hearse. Leaning his head back against the headrest, Gwangik wondered, Open a bag of chips and you're an enemy of the people. Good thing I had a hearty breakfast. Otherwise... Freezing for a moment in stunned silence, he exclaimed to himself, Stop it! This feeling an impending natural urge, the young man almost heard a voice in his head. Hello, Gwangik Yu. You can call me a mixture of nitrogen, methane, carbon dioxide, hydrogen, and other components. Sensing that the desire to release gas was becoming unbearable, Gwangik cursed, Damn it! Why now? Turning his gaze back to the girl behind him, he resolutely decided Okay, if you want freedom so badly... Having done his business, the young man enjoyed watching the expression on the face of the girl sitting behind him change instantly and how she desperately clamped her nose. Go wild on this chick, he thought gleefully. Seconds later, the bus began to be enveloped in a divine aroma that almost made all the purebred immortals turn inside out. The blonde, realizing he had done it intentionally, hissed, What a bastard. Sitting contentedly like a cat, Gwangik looked at the ceiling and concluded, Uncontrolled revenge completed. As the column of black buses followed its route, he pondered. Several hours have passed since the gas attack, and we finally arrived. Stepping out of the bus, the young man placed his suitcase on the sidewalk. Young immortals exited the salon one by one, dispersing in different directions. Looking around the area, Gwangik puzzledly wondered, What is this place? It looks like some kind of outskirts. Did they rent a hotel somewhere in this wilderness? While the young man was lost in thought, a stranger called out to him from behind, Hey, big guy! Turning around, he saw 2 guys. One of them, with ginger hair, rudely asked, What did you eat this morning? After which, his green-haired friend, standing next to him, sarcastically added, Do you have constipation or something? Smiling slightly at both of them, Gwangik briefly replied, A natural process. However, he noted to himself, Looks like these are the same half-breeds who befriended each other at the end of the bus. Approaching closer, the green-haired man introduced himself. I'm Kim Yo-han, 21 years old. Immediately after him, his ginger friend responded, "Bang, Guitai, 23. Hearing the latter's name, the young man froze for a second, struck by how similar it was to the performance that one had put on in the bus. Looking at the redhead, he jokingly remarked, "Hyung, then you were the one who ruined the air. I'm Yu Guanggeek, 20 years old." Bang Guitai didn't take offense, only cheerfully asked back, "Dude, really?" As the young man rolled his suitcase down the road, someone from the group interjected, "By the way, about age. Here it doesn't matter who is older and who is younger." Surprised by such a statement, Guanggeek clarified with Guitai, "Why? This is an orientation organized by the company. In this situation, we should address each other as Guitai-shi or Guanggeek-shi." The redhead just snorted, "It seems you really don't know anything." Looking ahead, the young man breathed out in amazement. "What is that?" Surveying the huge training complex they were approaching, the young man whispered in shock, "A real training center." A stern man, attracting the attention of applicants, commanded in a powerful voice, "Everyone line up in 5 rows." After a short pause, he barked, "Faster!" And immediately, all the young immortals rushed forward at full speed. Watching the candidates panting from the sudden rush, Guanggeek figured to himself, "Wow, how many are there? About 100 people, probably. A huge recruitment." Observing how almost everyone began clutching their knees or chests after a short run, the young man wondered, "And by the way, why did they get so winded?" He didn't have time to react when a voice boomed from the stands, "What are we doing here? Dying. Are you laughing at us?" Turning around at the familiar voice, Guanggeek gasped, "It's—" Looking closely at the man on the dais, the young man instantly recognized the bald man from the exams. Now he was dressed in a military uniform and cap. "Our baldy examiner?" thought Guanggeek. Looking around, he noticed a familiar fiery red head of hair, and next to it, a girl with a pink bob. "Looks like there's Candle and Nuna with short hair too," he added to himself. Crossing his arms over his chest, the bald man addressed the applicants. "From today for a month, you will have to tear your muscles apart for your own progress." Écoutez, having paused briefly, he continued, "I must say, we are deeply disappointed in you already. What can you possibly accomplish with such poor stamina? In my day, things were quite different." Continuing his speech, the man ordered, "Everyone turn your heads back." And as one, they all obediently complied. Pointing to 3 trees in the distance, he inquired, "Do you see those trees?" Frowning, he announced a harsh condition, "Only the first 15 people will pass." Raising his voice again, the man roared finally, "Run!" And the young people, as if unleashed, rushed towards the goal, knocking each other over with wild screams. Looking back, Guanggeek Yu noticed his new acquaintances and thought, "Gui Tai Hyun, Yon Han Hyun." Looking ahead, he saw those pure-blooded immortals. "Oh, here are our prince and princess. Look how hard they're trying," he noted to himself. Continuing to run at half speed and unimpressed by his rivals, the young man reasoned, "I don't want to brag, but I could overtake them all before reaching the halfway point, even on one leg." Moving completely effortlessly, he decided, "I'll come in 14th or so. That should be enough." Guanggeek Yu recalled his mother's words. "Remember, no one must find out you are also a werewolf." He then asked her, "What if they do?" Without interrupting her work, Sulia Kang dryly replied, "You'll have plenty of trouble." The son pressed on, "Isn't there a more pressing reason?" Turning over her shoulder and frowning irritably, the woman snapped, "What does a werewolf look like in the eyes of an ordinary person, do you think?" Guanggeek Yu had no response to that. As if already seeing her son behind bars, his mother began listing, "A ticking time bomb that could explode at any moment. Almost a criminal, a guy howling at the moon naked, just a walking threat." Returning from his memories to reality, Guanggeek Yu, overcoming another meter, firmly decided, "I understand. I must not get caught under any circumstances." Running in as one of the last, the young man glanced at the sweaty and exhausted faces of the immortals. "Excellent. I came in 14th, he noted. Not a drop of sweat on his brow, the young man, with an absolutely calm face showing no trace of fatigue, forced out, "How tired I am." And then, imagining himself from the side, he thought contentedly, "Acting skills, 10 out of 10. Gradually, the immortals began to return to the stands one by one, where a bald instructor awaited them. Inspecting the half-dead young people after the short run, the man said disappointedly, "This won't do. Go home. What are you going to do next if you can't even handle this basic test?" The applicants froze in shock at these words. Seeing the genuine shock in their eyes, the man glared sternly over his glasses and asked, "Am I wrong?" After a short pause, he barked harshly, "All right, everyone on the ground." And waiting for them all to assume the push-up position, the trainer added, "Push-ups, let's go." As they began doing push-ups under his count, the man commanded, "Say I," on 1. After receiving a unanimous response, he continued, "Say idiot on 2. The applicants obediently repeated after him, and Gwangik-yu sarcastically noted to himself, "Interesting slogan they have." Continuing the exercise, the young man fell into thought. He remembered stories from employees of large corporations about their internships. They all said that they constantly played games and made new acquaintances. As the instructor walked among the immortals, he suddenly lost count and shouted, "Idiot cut!" Then muttered quietly, "Damn it, I got distracted." Noticing this, the pink-haired Nuna looked at the young man with disappointment and irritably threw, "Are you an idiot? Can't even keep pace?" Gwangik-yu merely smirked to himself. "I am most grateful for your support and encouragement." As the instructors patrolled the ranks, the applicants, drenched in sweat, continued to torture themselves with exercises. At one point, one of the immortals couldn't take it anymore. Trembling all over from exertion, he gasped, "Ugh, damn." Hearing this, the bald man approached the young man and said sternly, "Everyone stop, we didn't allow that in my day." Towering over the offending student, the trainer fixed him with a heavy gaze and sneered, "Was youth today raised to swear at an instructor on their first day?" The young man instantly turned pale and stammered, "No way!" Squatting down and keeping his eyes locked on the unfortunate fellow, the instructor warned, "Don't yell, half-breed. Do you want me to tear your eardrums?" While he grew paler and trembled under that gaze, the man added, "Or is something wrong with your head? Did you decide to mock your comrades?" Passing by the other students, another instructor surveyed the ranks and strictly remarked, "No shouting aloud. We all speak quietly. That's the foundation of everything." Everyone chorused, "Yes." But Gwangik-yu, looking at the trembling immortals, thought, "They really are weak after all." Again turning his gaze to the offender, the bald man coldly said, "In my time, we would have thrown people like you out the door. The world has become kinder now. I'll give you a choice." Continuing to pressure the young man, he offered, "Will you leave on your own or accept punishment?" Without hesitation, the young man blurted out, "I'll take the punishment." The trainer clarified, "You won't regret it?" And again, the young man firmly replied, "No way." Gwangik-yu continued to do push-ups, and the last thing he heard was a short "good" from the trainer, followed by a heart-wrenching crack. A moment later, a muffled scream of pain reached his ears. The young man immediately tensed up and glanced in that direction, wondering, "What happened? It sounds like a clean break." The young man twisted and turned, trying to see what was going on, but he couldn't get a clear view. Curiosity, however, got the better of him. "Wow, this is interesting. I need to take a peek." For a second, he managed to catch a glimpse of the scene. The punished student sat on his knees with a broken arm and tightly clenched lips while the trainer scolded him, "Shut your mouth. I'm talking to a wall. What kind of generation are we seeing?" Continuing to watch, Gwangik-yu assessed the situation and was amazed. Is he finished? He broke his own arm and is telling others to be quiet? The pain must be terrible. Although no, it's bearable in principle, but still not pleasant. Walking among the students, the trainer announced, "Let me tell you right away, punishment for breaking the rules starts with a fracture, so break them at your own risk. -1 point for profanity, -2 for shouting." Passing by Gwangik-yu, he continued dryly, -5 for fighting without permission. You'll learn the rest during the actual punishment. Noticing that the young man had been peeking all this time, the man sarcastically asked, "So, was it interesting, recruit?" Catching him off guard, Gwangik-yu merely thought to himself, "Not at all." Sighing in disappointment, the man began climbing the stairs to the building and muttered more to himself than to others. "They've really run wild. It wasn't like this in my day." Turning around, he commanded, "Everyone stand up, you first 15, no exceptions." The students began to rise one by one. Standing on the podium, the bald man loudly proclaimed, "My name is Lee Chang-mo. From now on, I am your instructor, Lee Chang-mo." Taking his place next to his colleagues, he nodded at Nuna, giving her the floor. Stepping forward, the girl pointed to the man and explained, "Instructor Lee Chang-mo will be responsible for training basic stamina, as it is inextricably linked with the restorative power of immortals." Surveying the crowd of young people from the height of the stands, Nuna continued, "Right now, you are mere chicks, but in order to work in the company, You must master the basics. Honing these foundations is the purpose of your orientation. While she was giving the briefing, Gwangik Yu, looking up at her, thought, if there are both tyrants and normal people among the instructors, then Nuna is probably one of the latter. She has a very calm and pleasant voice. Crossing her arms behind her back, the girl decided to introduce herself. I am Park Ta Ram, your instructor in techniques. The young man immediately wondered, techniques? What kind of techniques? After a short pause, the last of the instructors stepped forward and introduced himself. My name is Kim Han. Removing his glasses and glaring at the group with furious eyes, the man added, and I will be killing you all. A deathly silence descended for a moment after those words. Interrupting the awkward pause, Nuna hastily explained, you've all misunderstood. Instructor Kim Han will explain in detail how to control your bodies while being immortal. Gwangik, feeling an unpleasant chill run down his spine, thought, something doesn't feel right. It's written all over his face that he dreams of finishing us off. When Kim Han and Ta Ram finished speaking, Jang Mo stepped forward again and declared, anyone who wants to go back to mommy can just drop out. I would be happy if there was no one left here. These words didn't upset Gwangik at all. On the contrary, he figured, we only need to hold out for a month, and then mountains of gold await us. The main thing is not to get shot in the head, though that's trivial for immortals. Does the bald guy really think anyone will leave? Having said this, the bald instructor froze, waiting for someone from the applicants to give up. However, they all stood their ground, motionless. Surveying the ranks, the man dryly stated, the choice has been made. Pointing to a huge complex behind him, Jang Mo announced, so rookies, welcome to hell. After leading them into the dormitory, the trainer assigned them places and ordered 10 people per room. Once you change into your uniforms, everyone wait. Looking around at the meager furnishings, a pile of cots and dilapidated walls, Gwangik thought, well, what a dorm. We're not filming a horror movie after all. All sticky with sweat. I want to shower, muttered one of the new acquaintances. Hearing this, Gwangik thought, at least Yehan Hyun and Gui Tai Hyun ended up in the same room as me. Glancing around and noticing 2 pure-blooded immortals, he added to himself, I wish those prince and princess weren't here too. Looking at the neighbor sitting closest to him, the young man noted, that guy on the right, but aloud only asked with concern, are you having a hard time, buddy? The somewhat plump young man with brown eyes and rather ordinary features replied breathlessly, it's okay. Gwanik, however, noted to himself, apparently not all immortals are skinny as rails. Continuing to look around, he spotted a guy with attractive features reminiscent of Eastern roots and thought, and here's another type who looks just like Mansoor. Shifting his gaze, the young man saw 2 Snow-White twins and mentally concluded, those must be brother and sister. They look so much alike, I'll call them Poodle and Snowball in my head. Turning his attention to the last neighbor, a girl with gray hair and brown eyes, Gwangik summarized, and the last one is a rather simple girl. So, 7 guys and 3 girls. Looking around the room and wondering where to change, he wondered, I don't know about the others, but they could at least separate the rooms into male and female. Where are we even supposed to change? Noticing a flimsy door with an inscription, the guy realized, oh, I see. What messy handwriting, sarcastically thought in his head. At that moment, a pure-blooded girl called out to Gwangik, and sizing him up with a contemptuous look, warned, don't even think about peeking into the changing room? To which the young man dryly retorted, that's rich. She looked at him with complete disbelief and disgust. Seeing such a reaction, the guy sighed to himself. Mom, I haven't even been figured out yet, and they've already labeled me a pathological criminal. What am I supposed to do about that? Suddenly, the quiet gray-haired girl spoke in an unexpectedly gruff voice. We're all going to have to follow strict rules if we want to get along. Hearing her, Gwangik was taken aback. Wow, what a voice. Sounds like a seasoned gangster. Picking up on the topic, a young immortal stared with his green eyes at Gwangik and added, take care of your physiology outside this room. Anyone who breaks the rules is dead. Hearing the words of the pure-blooded man, the blonde who had been staring at the guy with indifference just now raised her hand and confirmed, I agree. Listen, Sherlock, you're getting on my nerves, the young man thought mentally. 2 of Gwangik's new friends also raised their hands one after another. Me too. And me too. Caught off guard by such betrayal, he was confused. Wait a minute. Where did our 2-hour friendship go? Catching the general wave, Each of the immortals in turn agreed with the idea of order, adding their weighty word. The young man, feeling awkward, thought, "What is it with everyone staring at me?" Interrupting his thoughts, the pure-blooded immortal spoke again, "And don't forget to brush your teeth. Cleanliness is key." The guys nodded in unison, agreeing with the leader. Guangik, taking this as a personal insult, was indignant inwardly. "Hey, I actually brushed them normally. And about that gas attack, well, sorry, it just happened." Watching everyone unanimously support the idea of discipline, raising their hands one by one, the guy realized, like it or not, I'll have to get along with these people for a whole month. Raising his hand last and exhaling dryly, "Agreed," he decided for himself. "Since we're in the same boat, I guess I'll have to fit into the team." The glass door to the cafeteria creaked open slightly. Guangik sat near his new green-eyed acquaintance and listlessly poked at his food, while one of the instructors lectured, "Eat up and listen. There are 10 people in each dormitory room. This is your team. Rooms from 1 to 10 are assigned according to their location." Walking between the tables, the instructor continued, "Once you finish lunch, choose a leader in your groups." The young man lazily turned around, wondering, "A leader? Let's see." He didn't have time to finish his thought when a girl with light hair declared imperiously to another pure-blooded man, "You will be the leader." The guy whom Guangik nicknamed the Prince dryly clarified, "Why?" To which one of the twins replied, "You're from those bloodlines." Supporting the proposal, a half-blood with fiery red hair added, "I agree." Raising his hand and looking away, the young man tried to express doubt. "I don't think he has a very good personality. And in general, isn't a leader someone who is open and able to unite people?" The light-haired girl looked at Guangik indifferently and, interrupting him, snapped, "If you think you could be the leader, then you are deeply mistaken. The fact that purity of blood matters most here is indisputable." Continuing her thought, she coldly added, "Therefore, the right thing to do is simply ignore your opinion. The leader has been determined." The guy literally turned pale with anger from such words. "Our Sherlock would make an excellent traffic cop. I just want to throw her into the middle of an 8-lane highway in Gangnam." After a while, when everyone was let outside after lunch to receive supplies, Guangik wondered, "I thought we were going to start training now, but no, they just gave us clothes, cheap boots, and a bunch of junk." Observing his neighbors who crowded on the parade ground, sorting through things, the young man noted, "Because of the fact that 100 people huddled together, time flew by quickly. After a shower and a short rest, we had dinner, and then night crept up unnoticed." Passing by an office where all the students were gathered, one of the instructors announced, "Lights out immediately after a short lecture." Entering the room with the immortals, he commanded, "Everyone look at the screen." After that, a video started playing. On the recording, one of the company's employees said, "I think each of you knows the name of our organization, right?" From the very first seconds of the video, the young man was distracted and whispered to Guangik, "What is the name of the company?" To which the green-haired guy asked back, "Do you know anything at all?" Guangik confidently retorted, "I know I'm cool. Isn't that enough?" Continuing the argument, Guangik inquired, "Are you completely out of your mind?" The young man philosophically noted, "People are a little crazy in general." While Guangik was arguing with his new acquaintance, the video continued. The man on the screen said, "Hwarem, Information Technology and Communications. The purpose of the training is to select official employees of Hwarem." Focusing his attention on the screen, he heard, "Our company is supported by the government. We are not civil servants in the strict sense, but consider that we work for the benefit of the state." Catching on to the last phrase, the young man pondered, "So, my father called this test a civil service exam to hide the truth from my mother." Guangik continued watching while the man on television rambled on. "For this reason, the selection criteria have been significantly relaxed. Back in my day, you couldn't even dream of working at Hwarem if you didn't know how to dodge knives while running." Listening to all of this, the young man with an indifferent expression wondered, how many times a day did this person repeat his catchphrases in the spirit of "back in my day"? The man on the video looked straight into the camera and stated bluntly, "In short, if you don't want to end up in the afterlife, strain both your muscles and your mind. Lecture over." The recording didn't stop there, and a voiceover asked, "Isn't that a bit too little?" To which the hero of the video, crossing his arms across his chest, grumbled, "What else is there to explain? They all know it anyway." The voiceover retorted, No, you're wrong." Emerging from the shadows, Instructor Nuna, the very same one who led the dialogue, appeared before the camera and explained, Hwarem has a clear goal, to help you learn how to properly manage your immortality power. Concluding the video, Nuna advised, I hope you remember my words. Catching on to the last phrase, Gwangik Yu pondered, use immortality power correctly? Deep night had already fallen outside when the instructor commanded, everyone prepare for lights out. Stretching out on his cot, Gwangik blissfully closed his eyes. After a shower and in a soft bed, it was so cozy. A baby's sleep was certainly guaranteed for him. Listening to his roommates arguing and grumbling over every little thing, someone breathing too loudly, someone twitching a finger, the young man smirked to himself. Quite a bunch of delicate flowers have gathered here. Calling out to the guy, his roommate snapped irritably, Hey, for goodness sake, stop breathing! The young man sarcastically retorted, Am I supposed to die right here? The roommate just growled, do us all a favor and go collapse in the hallway. Tiredly watching the squabble, the young man remembered his father's instructions. As he said, it takes at least 3 years to master hypersensitivity. Continuing to ponder in a horizontal position, Gwangik estimated 23-year-old Pan Guite is the oldest here. Most likely, everyone's sensitivity is heightened to the limit right now. Resignedly sighing, Guite muttered, I won't be able to sleep again tonight. The young man clarified, And how do you even live if you can't close your eyes? Continuing the conversation, the green-haired guy replied, I use an extreme method. Gwangik smirked. What, are you slitting your throat? Turning his head, Guite pointed to his neck and confirmed. Something like that. Passing out is also an option. We immortals don't have side effects. Getting up from bed, Gwangik offered, Maybe I can lull you to sleep? The guy, turning away, casually tossed, Knocking out an immortal isn't easy. Closing his eyes and ignoring the young man behind him, Guite continued to act smart. If you overdo it with your strength, you might not come around for 2 days. Before his opponent could finish speaking, Gwangik quickly wrapped his hand around his throat and began to squeeze. The guy only managed to exhale. What the fu... However, the young man ignored the protest, whispering, Sweet dreams. Let me haunt your sleep. Watching this scene, a ginger-haired guy started to turn pale and muttered, Oh my God. Noticing that Guite was quickly losing consciousness, the redhead blurted out, Are you a professional lullaby singer? Gwangik, meanwhile, carefully laid his neighbor back on the pillow. Turning to the redhead, the young man winked, Do you also want to dream with me in the starring role? The guy only managed to squeak, Oh good, yes, and immediately his neck was firmly gripped by Gwangik. In a second, all the other immortals who were still conscious jumped up from their places, watching as the guy knocked out another roommate. Breaking the awkward silence, the young man asked the others, Does anyone else need help? In response, everyone raised their hands without hesitation. A moment later, the room was filled with sounds of brief struggles, which time and again were replaced by absolute silence. Looking at the chubby immortal who was now sleeping soundly, the guy thought, Excellent, I sent them all to the realm of Morpheus, only... Turning around, he saw 2 purebloods who were waiting for him expectantly. Prince and Princess, flashed through his mind. The girl spoke first. Turning her gaze away, she calmly said, They say everyone has a talent. Help me too. Looking at her with irritation, Gwangik grumbled, Why should I? The girl parried. Why not? It's a practical question. We're roommates. You help me now, then I'll help you later. Turning to go back to his cot, the young man turned around thinking, Yes, very practical, but there is no desire to bother with her. After which he dryly said, Lights out. As Gwangik was about to lie down, he froze. An idea came to him. Sharply changing tone, the guy cheerfully approached the girl and, shrugging his shoulders, sang, All right, we'll fix it right away. Starting to warm up his wrist, he added, but without uttering another word, Gwangik swiftly struck the side of the girl's neck with the edge of his palm. A moment, and she, without realizing anything, fell onto the cot. Gwangik, pleased with his deed, praised himself. And this is not violence at all, just an effective lullaby. Looking around, the young man noticed the prince who was watching what was happening intently. Turning to him with his whole body, Gwangik sarcastically threw, Do you need it too? The pureblood frowned unhappily at the guy and, remaining silent, demonstratively turned to the wall. Heading towards his bed, Gwangik thought, Well, go ahead then. I want to hit the hay myself. Noticing dark circles under the prince's eyes, the young man noted to himself, That night, the entire third team slept soundly, except for one person. Smirking contentedly, Gwangik looked at him and thought, I can't wait for the next night. Hearing the harsh voice of the bald instructor shouting a short run, the young man noted that the second day was hectic from the very beginning. First lesson, the instructor, Tippoki's Saintrey, a typical boomer. From the start of the run, immortals and half-bloods began to gasp for air. Gwangik, skillfully pretending it was difficult for him too, listened to the instructor's shouts. "You think this is hell? We're just warming up." And the guy himself thought, basic endurance training, running and strength exercises. Having finished the run, the immortals moved to the covered part of the complex. Lining up in pairs, they listened to Nuna's instructions. "The body of an immortal cannot be called invulnerable. It has plenty of weak spots," she proclaimed. At that moment, Gwangik noted to himself, second lesson, instructors, Nuna and Kare. Standing next to his partner, the young man heard from him, "I have some experience in wrestling." Gwangik calmly asked, "Oh, seriously? So if I apply?" The guy said meaningfully. Without warning, rushing at Gwangik, his opponent shouted, "Let's not take it personally." The young man didn't have time to react as his partner tried to tackle him to the ground. However, Gwangik did not respond in any way and didn't even resist. Freezing for a moment, the guy only managed to exhale. "Oh, almost." Without saying another word, Gwangik struck sharply with his elbow into his opponent's jaw. His face contorted in pain and shock, and the young man calmly added, "Didn't fall." When Nuna approached them, Gwangik's opponent was already lying unconscious on the floor. The instructor dryly remarked, "Not bad." But the young man modestly parried, "I just got lucky." After training with Nuna, the immortals moved on. Stopping in front of a path strewn with protruding blades, Gwangik noted to himself, "Third lesson, instructor, candle." At that moment, the mentor said, "The tradition of immortals is running at a trot over knives." Standing behind his students, who were literally trembling with fear before the dangerous path, the man simply said, "Forward." Looking at the blades in the ground, everyone cried out in unison, "There are knives sticking out 3 centimeters." And only Gwangik thought, "The teacher made me run over 15-centimeter blades." Recalling the past week on another warm night, Gwangik Yu pondered, "To make the game believable, I had to apply pressure to certain points on my body. I tried my best to play the weakling." With a satisfied grin like a cat, the young man returned to his room, wondering, "I wonder if His Highness will refuse me again today. I'll ask one more time, and then it's over." Entering inside and seeing all his roommates sitting neatly on their cots, he was surprised. It's so funny when he turns away with a displeased expression from, "Wait, what's going on?" Sitting down next to the green-haired boy, the young man whispered, "What's the matter? Is our hypersensitive Sherlock again ordering everyone to be silent?" To which Gui Tai explained, "Basically, last night while we were sleeping," turning his gaze to the pureblood, who sat with dark circles under his eyes and an expression of extreme irritation, the boy continued, "Our leader left the room because he couldn't sleep. He had a conflict with guys from another section who also couldn't sleep, and he gave them a harsh lesson." Amazed by Gui Tai's story, the young man thought, "And he isn't afraid to blurt all this out in front of him." Meanwhile, his comrade added, "Because of that, many people glared at us today." Distracted from the conversation, Gwangik heard footsteps approaching their door and visibly tensed up. The pureblood spoke sharply, "This is my problem. I'll handle it myself." The young man merely snorted to himself, "No one was planning on solving your problems anyway, sir." Before he could do anything, several immortals with equally exhausted faces barged into the room without invitation. Their leader sternly scanned everyone present and shouted angrily, "Who here is Yu Gwangik?" Without hesitation, the young man raised his hand and confidently replied, "I am." Then he doubted, "Could His Highness have mentioned my name?" Meeting the gaze of the pink-haired boy, the man asked again, "Is that you?" The young man, feeling the tension rising, didn't back down. "Yes, it's me. So what?" For a moment, the uninvited guest was flustered and quietly said, I also," lowering his eyes to the floor in embarrassment, the boy from another team stammered, "I also want to dream about you." Such a strange request stunned the young man. His teammates didn't know how to react either. Some started to chuckle softly, while others froze in shock. Lost for words, Gwangik mumbled, "Sorry, but I like girls." The immortal from another group threw his hands up and blurted out, "Damn it, not that kind of dream. Turn me off. I heard after that everyone sleeps like a baby." Looking at his comrades standing behind him with exhausted expressions, the boy from the neighboring room added, "We're really going to kick the bucket soon. Do us a favor and help us out." While the pink-haired man led Gwangik down the hallway, the young man decided to clarify. "But how did you even find out about me?" The guide readily explained, "But how could we not? Rumors have already spread them throughout the area." Surprised, the young man asked again, "Rumors?" The boy, with a slight chuckle, explained, "You weren't aware? Kim Johan doesn't keep his mouth shut." Continuing to chat along the way, Gwangik inquired, "And that phrase about dreams?" The interlocutor, understanding what he meant, replied, "He said that you can arrange it if I ask." The young man immediately realized, so that's why he laughed then. Almost reaching their destination, the boy asked Gwangik, "Is this a difficult request?" The young man, already preparing his signature move, smiled reassuringly. "No, it won't take long." Entering the other room, he began to knock them out one by one, Gwangik recalled. That night, at the request of the boys from the first group, my signature neck strike was delivered to each of them. Going to the cafeteria the next morning, the young man saw that same boy beaming with joy and waving cheerfully at him. Gwangik noted to himself, "The leader of the first team sat down for breakfast beside me." Unable to contain his delight, he exclaimed, "You have golden hands. Last night was pure bliss." Gwangik, burning with secondhand embarrassment, said through gritted teeth, "Dude, be more specific. People might get the wrong idea." Stepping out into the fresh air early in the morning, he sighed. And then, training continued. Once again driving the Immortals on their morning run, the bald instructor watching their futile efforts mockingly threw, "How long will you keep dying from a simple warm-up? Are you even planning to develop yourselves?" The coach fell silent for a moment, staring intently at one of the lagging students. Observing how clumsily a plump immortal was trying to run, sweating profusely, the instructor grumbled in disappointment. "Things were different in my time. Today's immortals can't even control their weight. Is it laziness or some kind of protest?" When Gwangik had overcome half the distance, he turned around and noticed that the lagging boy sharply veered off course. Stopping and following him, the young man saw the poor fellow clutching a tree trunk from exhaustion and beginning to feel nauseous. Approaching closer, he asked, "Are you okay?" The man only responded in a trembling voice, "Don't pay attention to me. Keep running." Not leaving his side, Gwangik clarified, "What about you?" The boy, squatting by the tree and lowering his head, mumbled, "I won't be able to finish anyway." Trying to cheer up the unfortunate man, the young man asked, "Did you read Crown Rush?" He easily parried, "Who hasn't?" Gwangik, imitating the hero of the title, solemnly proclaimed, "Become a man who doesn't give up, my friend." Not understanding what his interlocutor was getting at, the fat man remained silent. As the young man approached even closer, the boy stubbornly resisted. "I'll stay here," he said, unwilling to leave the shade. Ignoring the immortal's protest, Gwangik jerked him up by the scruff of his neck and reasonably noted, "If you're going to give up, you shouldn't have started." Forcing the poor fellow to look at him, the young man lit up with a confident smile and resolutely added, "Today, I'll help you reach the finish line." Pulling his comrade onto the road and resuming running, Gwangik pulled him by the hand and instructed, "Breathe, control your breathing. Don't drag your feet, or you'll run out of steam even faster. If it gets too much, switch to a fast walk." He continued to give advice until his companion barely kept up with him. While Gwangik was fussing over the student, the coach, noticing them near the finish line, carefully watched how the young man was helping the lagging one. However, the instructor preferred not to interfere yet. When the young man dragged his friend across the finish line, they were already waiting for them with the other immortals. The bald coach dryly announced, "Time's up. Both of you lose 5 points." Not at all upset, Gwangik caught his breath and exhaled. "Well, no big deal." His companion, completely exhausted, exclaimed in amazement, "You're crazy." To which the young man retorted, "Instead of apologizing, you are questioning my sanity?" Stepping aside, the young man threw over his shoulder, "Don't worry, I'm perfectly sane. Let's finish together tomorrow." The even more surprised immortal asked, "Why?" Before Gwangik could walk away, the boy shouted after him, "Why did you help me?" This question made the young man freeze in place. Looking at the exhausted face of the immortal, the young man reasonably inquired, "Is a reason really necessary for that?" Turning away again, he put an end to the conversation. "Without a sense of duty, I am nothing." Once again immersed in memories of the distant past, he saw the silhouette of a hero before his eyes who once saved him from monsters. To help someone who has fallen from powerlessness or is drowning, no reason is required, thought the boy. I'm sure that man thought so too. Therefore, reasons don't matter to me either. Returning to the locker room at the end of the day, Gwankik heard a question. Are you going to put the first team to sleep again tonight? The young man humbly replied, I guess I have to. While he lazily opened his locker, the green-haired boy advised, Then lull our leader to sleep too. He already has bruises under his eyes hanging down to his chin. Continuing to unpack slowly, the boy smirked. I ask him every night, Do you need it? And he immediately grimaces and turns away. It amuses me so much. While the trio were getting changed, the young man noticed that the ginger-haired boy was keeping to himself and staring into the void. Meanwhile, the green-haired one whispered to Gwankik, You two are quite a pair. Calling out to his friend, the young man leaned in and quietly asked, By the way, what's with Gwankik Yu being so down? The other simply waved his hand dismissively. Oh, that. Recalling a recent incident, the boy began explaining. So, it happened just a few days ago in the cafeteria. He paused for a moment, remembering how his friend had wandered between tables. Continuing his story, the green-haired youth remembered how Tai-hyun, while passing by a purebred girl, accidentally bumped her shoulder, causing her to drop her ID card. The boy managed to glance at the name on the card and was surprised. Woomi Ho? It's time to finish the story. If you enjoyed this manhwa, let me know and I will make a continuation. Rate it on a 10-point scale and support the channel with a subscription and comment. Thank you. See you in the next video.